Chapter 31. Dad, you must see that Bronc is a special case. Brand explained why to you carefully. It all makes sense to me. Her dad pursed his lips as he studied her. Yep, he could see right through her. Could see that her interest in Brand was tainting her decision-making. She knew her dad. He would save this conversation for later, thank goodness, but she would do her best to avoid it. "I'm sorry, son," he said as he looked Brand in the eye. "It's best for Bronc not to have you here. You see, not just Bronc, but also the others would see you as an outsider, someone who will judge." His hands came up to stop Brand's next words. "I know you don't think you'd be judging. It's not what you think that counts. It's what they think. They will feel judged. When it's only addicts in the room, they have a common bond. They share a weakness they're all trying to overcome. You don't have that weakness. Therefore, you're the enemy, so to speak." "Well, but sir, I believe Bronc needs me." "He doesn't. Left alone here, he's having to lean on God, not you or any other human being. It's an important bond he'll need in order to move forward and live his life free of addiction." Julia's heart ached for Brand. She watched as he swallowed hard. She wondered if Brand would question her father on the whole God issue like he did her. But as they sat in silence, his face said it all. "I don't believe God can help with this. I can help. Only me." Her father rose from his chair to sit closer to Brand, laying a hand on his shoulder. Brand gave her dad a slanting look. "He's doing well. Granted, like most addicts, the first week was rough, but since the detox, he's doing quite well." Brand turned to face him fully then, his eyes like saucers. "What kind of help did he get for detoxing? Are there drugs for that? I was miserable all week, feeling an agony that could only come from his physical distress. That was it, wasn't it?" Her father blinked again. Had he never thought about this twin connection? Maybe he didn't know of any twins. She sure never had. "I'm sorry for that. It seems to me since you have such a strong bond with your brother, you're the perfect person to pray for him. You'll know when he needs it most." Julia grimaced, knowing Brand wouldn't take this news well. Surprisingly, as she studied his face, she saw a small frown of contemplation. "And I will allow you to visit again next week. Actually, every week. Will that help?" He wanted to stay with him, not just visit, Julia thought to herself. "Lord, help him see this compromise as a victory." Brand didn't speak again, just stood, nodded once, then headed for the door. This was so opposite Brand's personality. He probably didn't know what to say to her father, the pastor of the church. Yet Brand was rarely intimidated by anyone. She followed him to the door. "Do you want to head out?" Once again he nodded. He grabbed the door handle and gave it a hard twist. Before she could walk out ahead of him, he turned back. "Give him a message for me." Her dad was standing now. "Of course." "Tell him I'd be with him if I was allowed." Then he rotated back and charged out the door. Brand felt as if his stomach lining had been scraped out and replaced with gasoline, raw and on fire. He wanted nothing more than to find Bronc and escape this place, this city, this state. And he'd do it. But for Julia. He opened the passenger door, then placed his hands around her tiny waist to lift her in. Her body was so delicate. She exuded so much strength, boldly putting him in his place when needed, that he thought of her as bigger. This little woman had gotten under his skin, right along with her spiritual prowess. He'd managed to avoid things of God by his newly God-seeking family, like Trevor had. But Julia, she was another story altogether. She had a grace about her, a spiritual tranquility that was hard to deny. He loved being around her, craved it even, and he didn't think it was only his attraction to her. He hated to admit it, even to himself. But he couldn't explain her lure, only that it almost felt supernatural. Brand hopped into his side of the truck and cranked the key over, starting it with a flurry. Shoving the gear shift into place a little harder than was necessary, he gave Julia a quick glance. Her brows were scrunched low. She looked confused. "Where are we going?" Her voice was small, as if she was cautious about opening any doors with him. He didn't blame her. Half of him felt the fury radiating off him even as he realized her presence alone was calming him. "Home." He shook his head. "Actually, not home. The ranch is underwater." Another flood of grief hit him. He blinked his eyes to try and get his emotions under control. "To Shelley's. That's where Norman is. I need to check on him." Catching her gaze, her sky-blue eyes caught his attention, reminding him they were the most beautiful things he'd ever seen. "Stop it." Covering his eyes with a hand, he rubbed. He needed to step away from Julia. She couldn't choose him, and he had too much on his plate anyway. Bronc, Norman, the ranch, they all needed his undivided attention. "We need to check on him," she countered. No. His tone was harsh, but they needed to face reality. "I'll drop you off at home." "My car's at Shelley's, remember? Besides, I want to help. We'll both go see Norman. I can read to him. You can help him figure out a plan for the ranch." Her eyes pleaded with him until he turned away, unable to tell her no if he looked much longer. "Please, don't shut me out. Norman will need all the help he can get, especially since one of his hardest workers is in rehab." Brand's head whipped back to glare at her. Bold, so bold. As he stared, and she didn't turn away, a realization hit. He guessed truth, only seemed bold. The truth was just that, truth. "Fine, let's go see Norman." The drive to Taylor's ranch was abysmal. All Brand wanted was to have a normal life, get to know a special woman. This woman. Date, fall in love, ranch, and live a long, happy life. But as he pondered his own future, all he saw was service to everyone in his orbit, and relentless anxiety over his twin because of the rest of his family was too distracted to care. Basically, he was destined to be the Cooper minion until the day he died, and not win the girl. "Are you all right?" A glance her way showed concern written all over her face. What he wanted to see was her stunning smile. "I know this had been hard on you. I'm so sorry my dad didn't allow you to stay with Bronc." Brand swallowed, hoping to put a halt to his emotions. A kind word would go a long way. "Not your fault." Not a grand comment, but all he could manage right now. She scooted closer as he drove and squeezed his thigh with her small hand, turning the bile into butterflies. "It will turn out well in the long run. Bronc will come through the other side a changed man. He will be sober and have a relationship with God." See, right there. Was that what he wanted for Bronc? Deprivation and religion? But this wasn't about what he wanted. It was about his brother. Always his brother. Brand felt the frown overtake his face as he lowered his brows and allowed his lips to droop. You look mad." "I'm not mad." "Talk to me." Why did she have to be so tuned into him? It would be better if he was the one asking her questions. That's who he was, the person who dug until a person gave up what was hurting them. The counselor. "You talk to me." With a pat to his thigh, she began. "Okay. First, Bronc will be fine. Put him in God's capable hands. Second, why aren't you in school?" A quick glance showed shock on Julia's face. He just thought of that. She was obviously long out of high school, but shouldn't she be in college? "Why are you changing the subject?" "We'll go back to it. Just curious." "I graduated from college last year." "How old are you anyway?" She smacked him on the thigh where her hand had been resting. "You're not supposed to ask a woman her age." That brought a true grin, one he hadn't felt in a long time. "Maybe, but I just did." The bark of laughter escaped her. He wanted to stop the truck and just watch, to see her amazing smile and listen to her mirth. It warmed his heart. "Fine. I'm older than you. 23. "Is that right? So I'm dating an older woman?" "Careful." "I'm always careful." "No, you're obviously not," she said around another laugh. "So, we're dating?" He really meant it as a joke, but yeah, he wanted whatever he could have with her. "We have been hanging out together, haven't we?" Let me see. To a hamburger joint with 5 other girls, to a recovery home for addicts, on a ride to find a particular addict, to a ranch that has been flooded. What have I missed? Is that your idea of dating?" Brand made a slow turn onto Taylor's Ranch Road, reluctant to end their time alone. "I do happen to remember a pretty spectacular kiss." He turned his head just in time to see a beautiful blush fill her cheeks. At a loss for words. "That hasn't happened before now." She elbowed him in the ribs this time. He grunted, then laughed. She joined him. It felt good to release the tension. Brand pulled up to the Taylor home and parked. As they let themselves into the house, Brand's gaze landed on a cheery Norman sitting on the couch, laughing it up with Shelley and the big armchair next to him. Something about that picture filled Brand with joy. "Norman, my man, how are you?" Brand stuck out a hand to shake with the older man. Julie came around the back of the couch and hugged Norman's neck from behind. He laughed and patted one of her arms. "Now that's a strong handshake, sir. You feeling good?" "Sure am. How are you two pups? Where have you been?" Brand reached across the sofa to take Julia's hand, guiding her to the front to sit next to Norman. "We're good. Been at the recovery home." "And how's our Bronc?" Brand sat hard in the other armchair, rubbed a knuckle across his brow. Julia answered for him. "We had a short visit. He's not so keen on being there, but he's been through the worst and is doing well." That's good, that's good. He's right where he needs to be." Brand frowned. "He wants out. I want in." Norman blinked and tilted his head. "Well, what do you mean you want in?" "I was hoping they'd let me stay with him. Help him." Norman sighed, looking grim. "I know, my boy, but that wouldn't be good for him." "You too? That's what they're telling me." "You do understand why, don't you?" "The pastor says I would be an outsider. The addicts would see me as the enemy. He doesn't know me from Adam. That seems a bit judgmental to me." Julia grimaced. Brand noticed, feeling the tug of regret until he reminded himself that truth was bold. "Judgmental but realistic," Norman said. Brand wanted to lash out, but this was Norman, the voice of reason and fairness and humility. He didn't want to ask, but couldn't help himself. "Okay, I'll bite. Why is it realistic?" "Well, it's simple. You don't have a problem. They do." "So? I wouldn't judge. I could help all of them." "And maybe you should. Be a part of the administration or a volunteer. It would do you good." Brand jumped to his feet and paced over to the window wall. It hadn't gone unnoticed that Shelley had yet to say a thing. His gaze skimmed the fields, full of puddles and flattened milo stubble. "I'm not after doing me good. I want to help my brother." Brand felt a bluster of steam building up. Didn't anyone get it? "Well, of course you do. You have an abiding love for him." Brand blew out a breath. Well, he guessed Norman did get it. Of course he did. This was Norman. "Sit down, son." Norman looked at Shelley. "Would you mind getting him some lemonade? Maybe Julia can help you." "I'll get some for you, too. And your medication?" "Sure." Shelley grinned and motioned for Julia to follow her. Once the girls were out of sight, Norman's eyes met his. "Listen, son, you have to let Bronc go through this without you. You have been picking up the pieces of his chaos for years. He told me all about you two. Just because you haven't been together these past months doesn't mean your care of him ever died off. He knows that. I know that. Plus, he had his dad and Rebecca and the cowhands watching over him. It's time he did this one thing on his own. What he needs is to put his trust in God, to learn to lean on him only, not his family, not his friends, not his past or his hard luck. If he doesn't do this himself, he'll never put his life to rights." From what exactly? Brand's tone was too curt, but his frustration was growing. What did Norman see in Bronc that needed healing besides the obvious? "What you told me about him believing your mom's death was his fault." Brand sat forward, digging his elbows into his knees, peering up at Norman. "Since you told me that, I've been trying to convince him otherwise, but you know how stubborn he is. About anything he believes he's responsible for. And by the way, he believes he is responsible for way too much." "Agreed," Brand swore, looking away. He would lose his mind before his twin was set free from all his guilt. Norman didn't speak until Brand's gaze came back to him. Brand noticed the weariness there, but there was also determination. "You haven't reached him in all these years. What makes you think he'll listen to you now?" Brand winced. Harsh, once again, truth. It's always bold. "If not me, then who?" "God." Brand drew his brows together in a deep frown of confusion, one he couldn't quite hide from Norman. "Maybe you'll acknowledge God before it's too late." Brand squirmed on the chair, letting silence permeate the room until he couldn't stand it anymore. "What do you mean, before it's too late?" "God won't always knock on the door of your heart. There will come a time he'll harden your heart if you don't listen." "Well, then what?" "Then you'll lose your chance to join him in eternity. You already know what that means." "Hell." "Yes, hell. A place of torment, weeping and gnashing of teeth. Julia laid that out for me pretty clearly. Gruesome, isn't it? But a real place. The Bible assures us. Normally, Brand would have said straight out that he didn't believe in hell. But something had been awakened in him. What if? Norman's voice stopped his supposition. But worse than hell, spending all eternity without God. Well, that's something I couldn't abide. There had been a time that wouldn't have bothered Brand. But then again, maybe that was because he'd never taken a really close look. Any words he might have said stuck in his throat. Feminine voices and the clinking of glasses from the other room floated in on the thickened silence. I could see your mind working. Norm shifted on the couch, drawing closer to Brand's chair. He leaned in, putting a hand on Brand's knee, making him flinch. You know, the only reason your loved ones are pushing you to take a closer look at Jesus is for your sake, he said in a quieter voice. You get that, don't you? Jesus doesn't need another person on his team, but he loves you enough to want you there. All it takes is faith, and then what we call a sinner's prayer, asking God to forgive our sins, believing Jesus died on the cross, was buried, and rose again to cleanse us from our sins, asking Jesus into our hearts, and then thanking him for the gift of eternity with him. Just that simple, and that profound. Brand didn't know how to respond. He didn't understand the stirring deep in his soul right now. What was happening to his self-reliance? Was it being broken down by a brother who was hanging on so tight they were both drowning? Or was it him alone who was sinking himself after he'd helped Bronc find a way to live again? Chapter 32. After 7 days apart, Julia snuck a peek at Brand as he drove. He'd worn his dark jeans with a soft flannel shirt, the color of his green eyes, the sleeves pushed up haphazardly to his elbows. He smelled wonderful, of soap and fresh air and hay. His features were stark but almost more attractive when he wasn't being his charming self. In fact, during the week of his absence, she had forgotten just how stunning he was to look at. She drank him in as he seemed distracted by more than his driving. She'd missed him in the last week. He hadn't called or come by. After the conversation he'd had with Norman at Shelley's family home, he'd only said 2 more words to her when he walked her out to her car. Good night, Julia. Not polka dot or sunshine, and not see you tomorrow, or even see you soon. She'd gotten in her car and driven off, watching him watch her in her rear-view mirror, her stomach sinking. She clung to hope only because at least his last words weren't goodbye. Today Brand got to see his brother again. Fortune favors the bold, she told herself. Even though she hadn't heard from him all week, she'd pulled her blonde curls up in a high ponytail, dressed in jeans and her favorite zip-up lavender sweatshirt over a white blouse, jumped in her little Valiant and dashed over to the tailor's place. Her plan was to join Brand to see his brother, despite his silence all week. Nerves at her boldness tied her stomach in knots, but she drove on. Thoughts of him surrounded her. She knew better than to set her sights on a man like Brand. If only he could see that Jesus could help him with Bronc. If only he could see Jesus offered peace. If only Brand would come to Christ, then a future together might be possible. If only... She shook her head, bringing reality back in place. Brand believed he was too self-assured to place his confidence in a God he couldn't see. If only he could understand how our own abilities fall so very short. If only. The saddest words in the English language. His only reaction was a nod when she insisted on going with him to the recovery home for his permitted weekly visit. For someone so confident, Brand had remained shaken by his experience with his brother. He needed her even if he'd never said so. Have you ever thought that maybe he doesn't need you? Unfamiliar doubt crept in along with the voice in her head, making her twist the dainty handkerchief she had in her hand into a snake-like wad. Her faith had always shielded her from this kind of doubt. She always prayed that God would go before her, then strode forward with confidence. He would. There was no room for doubt or fear when you have faith. Relax, Julia. She jumped a little at the first words he used after being so silent. Didn't he know that when you asked someone to relax, it only increased their anxiety? She wanted to yell her next words, but bit her lower lip to stop herself. I am relaxed. She sounded like a petulant child, even to her own ears. She wasn't relaxed. She knew it. He knew it. What's wrong? Brand said, not arguing, only cutting to the underlying problem. That was so like Brand. He never wasted words for argument's sake. He always looked for what was truly bothering a person. That was one of the things she loved about him. She loved about him. The words batted around her head. They hadn't even shocked her. Yes, she admitted it. She loved him, was in love with him, hard and fast and so irresponsible. She didn't know what to do with this love for him, or how to answer his question. She couldn't tell him that her love for him was the problem. You're so quiet. Are you nervous about seeing your brother today? Brand glanced at the wrinkled handkerchief in her lap and grunted. Are you? She blew out a pent-up breath. Yes. Why? Well, for lots of reasons. Chances are he'll beg you to take him home. I'm nervous for what it'll do to you. Well, maybe he won't. And if he does, what will you say? Are you sure about that? Yes. Okay, well, he tapped 2 fingers on the steering wheel, thinking, his jaw set in that same stern pose. I'll just tell him he can't come home yet. He must see the program through. Can you do that? She squeezed his shoulder in support, momentarily distracted by how thick with muscle it was. Will you be able to tell him no and walk out the door? Sure. Brand, ponder this well. Be prepared with your answer. It's important. Why? I don't want you hurt. He sawed his jaw back and forth, then twisted his mouth to the side. I'm fine. Yes, this was Brand. She was sure he would be. Brand slowed to turn onto the church property and parked. Instead of coming through the front door, they skirted around to a side door her dad had suggested they use. He was going to bring Bronc to one of the Sunday school classrooms where they could visit in private. A little on the early side, the 2 of them sat at a long table with the only adult-sized chairs in the room. The rest were miniatures dedicated to the church youngsters. Flannel boards with baby Jesus, Noah's Ark, David and Goliath, and a myriad more Bible story characters were stuck to the surface. Brand began to fidget as they waited. Soon he was on his feet, cruising around the room. He gazed at the various posters of scriptures and the Bible stories as he let the silence hang between them. The door opened. Here they are, her dad said before he moved out of the opening for Bronc to stride in. And he did. Stride. That was such a good sign. Brand stiffened, but didn't say a word. Bronc came closer, glanced around the room, looking for Shelley, Julia suspected. Bronc's expression clouded when he didn't find her, but he looked surprisingly good. Beard beginning to take shape, neatly trimmed, just like Brand's. Hair combed straight back, but beginning to release in waves. A little longer than his brother's. He wore dark jeans and a flannel shirt pushed up at the elbows, just like his twin. The similarities were glaring. It made Julia's heart flip before it settled. This was not the man she was in love with, but a mirror image. She looked at him with a more clinical eye. Usually at this point in an addict's recovery, they looked rough and worn out from the fight, but Bronc looked rested. As her dad closed the door behind himself, the three of them were left to the strained silence in the room. She broke the ice. "How are you, Bronc? You look good." She reached one arm around his waist and gave him a side hug. He only patted her on the shoulder with one hand, then moved away. Brand remained motionless. "He looks good, doesn't he?" she prompted him. "Come here," Bronc said as he trod forward and grabbed his brother into a huge hug. "Good to see you, Nilla." Brand sighed, visibly relieved and annoyed at the same time. He stepped out of the hug. "Well, good to see you, too. How are they treating you?" Not the words she would have used, but no sense beating around the bush, she guessed. "You did the right thing bringing me here. It's been tough, but I'm good now. Ready to go home. I'm sure Norman needs me." And there it was. Julia's gaze locked onto Brand's face. He avoided her eyes, and his mouth drooped. Disappointment and angst, both painfully visible. He recovered quickly this time. "Come on, let's sit. Tell me about your week." Bronc obeyed like a puppy who'd thought to get fed, then loved on. No uncertainty evident on his identical face. They sat. Julia stood in the background. Bronc proceeded to explain his days. The counseling, the group sessions, exercise programs, the worship, devotions, even the food they all had to participate in preparing. "I'll bet the churchy stuff is no fun. But at least you have a warm place to stay, food, even a place to exercise. That's good, right?" "I don't mind the churchy stuff. It makes sense, Brand. It all makes sense. And I feel good. My body is recovering along with my mind. And now my soul." Brand nodded, surprising Julia. She'd expected disapproval. "I won't need to stay for the whole time. I'm ready now. Norman needs me. How's the ranch?" Brand blew out a breath, then pressed against the chair back, studying Bronc. Sorrow filled his eyes. He rolled his lips in, then began. "First of all, I'm not taking you home. You're staying for the whole program. Second, the ranch is underwater, so there's nothing you can do about it anyway. Norman is doing well. Chemotherapy is working wonders, it seems. We are all helping the Taylors with their ranch chores. You're not needed." Bronc's shoulders slumped. Julie had seen that posture every time an addict was told they couldn't go home. But she was proud of Brand. He had not backed down. Yet his words. "What Brand means is, everything is covered for the time being, so you can take your time and recover. Heal." One side of Bronc's mouth lifted in a semblance of a smile. Julia felt her breath hitch in her throat, taken aback by the exact grin she'd seen on Brand's mouth dozens of times. It was one thing to know the twins looked alike, but to see the same reactions, smirks, grins, and body gestures was unsettling. She wondered if she'd ever get used to it. Good news, Bronc said, looking to Brand. Part of the program is work. We're required to pitch in. Bring in money for the recovery home. Take a guess where my group will be working. Brand's eyebrows rose in question. Julia was amazed at how calm he seemed when she knew how much saying no to Bronc had cost him. Brand was nothing if not diplomatic. Tailors. We've been hired to move most of their herd, fix down fences, repair the barns, and some will help with their winter crop of onions and leeks. Then he smiled that stunning grin that had the ladies falling at the Cooper men's feet. Brand's brows were knit together in concern. How will that work? Pastor drives us, then picks us up at the end of the workday. Mr. Taylor oversees our work. Makes sure no one gets into trouble. Into trouble? The deepening frown on Brand's face showed concern and had dipped into worry. Bronc smirked. We are a bunch of addicts, brother. Making sure we're not searching for booze or cajoling other workers for it. You get it. Brand's face fell even more, if possible. A deep sadness darkened his eyes. For the first time that she'd ever seen, Bronc's eyes looked livelier than Brand's. I'm glad they're starting you this soon. It must mean you're all doing well. She patted Bronc on his back. Being physical is the best way to work the alcohol out of your system and the desire out of your brain. Brand ripped his eyes from Bronc and glared at her. She wanted to dig into why, but she didn't dare. I'm really proud of you, Bronc. Are you enjoying the Bible studies? Bronc's broad smile returned. Yes, He rubbed the back of his neck as he snuck a peek at Brand's face. I'm learning a lot. I'll have to discuss it with you sometime. His smile communicated more than words ever could have. Brand's lips twisted in a sneer as he looked on. She didn't know if Brand was jealous of their camaraderie or of Bronc learning about God. She'd address it on the ride home. Bronc shifted his weight. I need to get back. You don't need to go yet, Brand said. I want to find out if you need anything. His eyes lingered on Bronc's. If you need me, Bronc's smile now was designed to reassure Brand. What I need is for you to believe me that I've got this. Stunned. That was the only way to describe Brand's reaction to Bronc's words. His expression also looked a little panicked. His eyes slightly widened and his mouth grim. Did he worry he wouldn't be needed anymore? Now would be a good time to leave. Come on, Brand. He's got this. He has assured you he'll be fine here. Though she knew he meant he was well enough to be done with rehab, she would use the misdirection to get Brand out of here quickly. Come on, give him a hug and let him get back to his program. She took hold of Brand's arm, but waited for him to move before turning for the outer door. The look of disappointment on Bronc's face was obvious, but he must have decided now was not the time to fight it. Bronc came forward and pulled Brand into a deep hug. Once he'd let loose, he said, Soon, brother. Bronc strode toward the inner door. See you, Julia. Take good care of my brother, he said without looking back. Then he was gone. Chapter 33. He looked good, didn't he? Julia began before Brand could launch into all that was wrong with their visit. Brand's hands had turned white from gripping the steering wheel as he drove them toward Taylor's ranch. His jaw bulged from his clenched teeth. His hair's a little longer than yours, but he looks even more like you now that the alcohol is out of his system. A small sound of agreement came from low in his throat. He's a little thinner, but he'll fill in. By the time the 3 months are over, he'll be pretty healthy, don't you think? Trying to get Brand to talk to her was tricky. She wanted to keep it positive, but goodness, this was the hardest thing. Brand wasn't the mute type. She waited, gave him time. After an agonizing 10 minutes passed, she was ready to prod again. Then he spoke. "He wants out of there." "Yes, he does," she warned him about this. "I think I'll give him another week and then pick him up." "Brand, no!" How could she convince him? The alcohol is gone, but his liver still craves it. His mind still wants it. He's not ready yet. Remember, we talked about this. Brand pressed his lips together and the muscles in his jaw jumped again. Anger was brewing. She didn't want him to blame her in order to justify springing Bronc out of the program. Lord, please give me the words. A new thought came into her head. Norman. They were nearly back. Could she put him off until then? Did you check on Harper West this week? What's the water situation? Just as Brand was about to turn down the drive to the Taylors, he jerked the wheel enough to keep going straight. Good thought. Let's go check. She wanted to sigh in relief, but didn't dare. Letting the silence fill the truck was hard for her, but oh so necessary right now. Brand didn't say another word until they had bounced down the dirt road toward Harper West. As they approached the east levee, where the gate was wide open, Brand stomped on the brake. "That's the truck Shelley uses. What's she doing here?" And sure enough, a truck was parked at the edge of the floodwater, just past the gate on the slope of the road going into the ranch. But no Shelley was to be seen. A deep foreboding filled Julia. Where could she be? They both leapt out of their own truck at the same time. Julia wasn't about to let Brand traipse off to find Shelley alone. Why is the ranch still filling? The rain stopped. Brand tromped toward the pump house. Julia followed behind. The rain stopped, but the rivers are still overflowing. It has to go somewhere. Looks like we're the target. Oh, Lord, please stop the flooding. Help us to find Shelley. Do you ever do anything without bothering God? Brand mumbled this under his breath. Though Brand hadn't turned back to say it, she'd heard him anyway. Figured he hadn't meant it for her ears. Her stomach sank. Was he going to reject her because of God? What would she do if he did, now that her heart belonged to him? Brand waded into the space in front of the open door to the pump house. Are you in here, Shelley? No answer. Shelley! He hollered this time. Where would she go? Julia stood just above the waterline. She could see Brand wading around in the water, but lost track of him when he stepped up onto a platform of some kind. After what seemed too long a time, he began wading out. He was ruining his good boots, but didn't seem to give two thoughts about them. Norman is going to be upset the pumps are going underwater. So where do you think Shelley went after finding that out? Dunno. Julia wondered about that for a minute. Shelley was here trying to do something for the ranch. What would Julia be able to do under the circumstances? What would she have to offer a man like Brand, a cattle rancher? Sorrow seeped into her. Brand lived in Wyoming, for goodness sake. In what world could she have a future with him? More sadness barraged her. What would she do when he went back? Brand brushed past her, his boots making sloshing noises as he walked. Where are you going? Have binoculars in the truck. Confused, Julia turned around and got her feet moving, following him back up the levee to the truck. He took a minute to dump his boots of water, then rummaged around in the glove compartment. Once Brand retrieved the binoculars, he jogged the rest of the way up the hill to the top of the levee. Positioning the binoculars to his eyes, he began scanning the length of the ranch, then ended with a quick look down the old tracks on the levee. A wave told Julia he'd found her. Relief filled her as she ran up the hill toward him, panting as she reached him. "Found her?" He pointed. Sure enough, Shelley was on her way back toward them. "What do you suppose she was doing at that end of the ranch?" "Dunno." He sure wasn't giving her much conversation. For such a talkative, beguiling man, he had shut down on her. This whole thing with Bronc was changing their relationship. What could she do to rectify that? Or should she even try? Once Shelley was within talking distance, Brand didn't hesitate. "What are you doing?" He still sounded angry. She wondered if it was still aimed at her, or at Shelley for having worried him. "I went down to the other end to check the measuring stick. I should have checked the gates to the pipes, too, but I didn't go out on the small levee to check them. I'm sure they would have opened them, though." Brand looked confused. "What pipes?" "Bronc never told you? That has been one of his projects the whole time he's been here. He and a couple of hands installed pipes for Norman at the slough end of the borrow pit with gates. That way Norman can open and close them as needed to let irrigation water in or flood waters out." Brand's hands landed on his hips. "Why did Norman send you? I could have made that trek." "Calm down. He didn't send me. Under the circumstances, I just went." "What circumstances?" "The laborers left for Mexico the second the harvest was done. Court is still in Wyoming, Bronc's in rehab, and Norman is homebound at my dad's. I'm worried, Brand. The slough is way past flood levels. Must have happened fast. It can do that." Brand scrubbed a hand around his nape and cursed. "Still, he should have involved me. It could be dangerous at that end right now." Julia was caught up in her own fretting, listening to Brand and Shelley converse about a world she knew nothing about. While Brand and Shelley fussed over the ranch, Julia couldn't help but wonder about the relationship between Brand and Shelley. Brand showed true concern for Shelley's well-being. Julia hadn't realized the two were so close. She could easily visualize Shelley wanting Brand. Of course she would. He was handsome the same way Bronc was, only minus the debilitating addiction. Brand was a solid, cleaned-up version of Bronc, with other great qualities besides. "Actually, no." Shelley's voice knocked Julia out of her destructive thoughts. "Bronc set it up so it's easy to get to everything down there. He's always thinking of what will make Norman's life easier. He has an engineering mind, that's for sure." Julia felt so out of her element here. Would Brand even want a girl like her when he could have someone like Shelley? They seemed to understand each other. Watching their comfortable communication was eroding her self-confidence. Brand was so compelling, standing before the other woman with his big hands on his hips, a tilt to his head that had him looking down from his great height, her delightful face peering up at him. Their voices carried on and on about what Norman wanted and how to care for the spread. They would have to wait until the water receded, she said. Then they could get equipment in to patch the levees, he said, detailing how they'd go about doing that. In the meantime, the cattle, horses, and sheep were safe, he said, and they could continue to bring in hay from the small side road that led to the points from the northeast levee. Julia's own heart missed beats while he spoke, interacting with Shelley in a way he never would with her. After what had to be 20 minutes of conversation that grew in intensity and detail, she felt smaller and smaller. Brand had dropped his hands from his hips and was now using them to help describe his ideas to her. Shelley was getting excited with him and jumping right in with her additions to his designs and concepts. Perfection. They would make the perfect couple. And though Shelley believed in God, Julia knew her faith wouldn't rob her of an unbelieving man like Brand, while Julia's strict convictions would. For the first time in her life, she felt a resentment building toward God. That's when the unnatural voice in her mind started. If you didn't believe you're not to be unequally yoked in marriage, you could have this man. Yeah, that seemed reasonable. Wouldn't it be okay for her to love God and be with a good man, even though he might not share her faith? Again, the devil's voice knocked at the door of her mind. You are too zealous about your faith. You could give God up altogether, and then the two of you could be happy with just yourselves, answering your own questions, following your own paths, taking counsel from yourselves. That did sound simpler. Just then, a grand presence seemed to shake her. Powerful thoughts began to blanket her. Shut the enemy down. Don't let him get a stronghold. The warning obliterated every shred of her previous thoughts. Her heart sped, her mind spun, until words propelled from sheer emotion spewed from her mouth. "We saw Bronc today," she blurted, then flushed. She hadn't meant to interrupt like that. Shelley's gaze jerked to her. Her eyes widened, making Julia wonder if she'd forgotten she was there. "That's right, you did. How did it go?" Her voice was suddenly timid. Guilt sliced through Julia at how her thoughts had drifted off to all the wrong places. Her heart went out to Shelley. By the look on her face, her feelings for Bronc hadn't changed one bit. "He's well. He looks good." Julia softened her own voice, came closer to offering a comforting hug, but decided to hold back. Sadness gathered on Shelley's face. Her love for Bronc was right there, apparent in the depths of her brown eyes and glistening tears. How could Julia have let shameful jealousy color her portrayal of Shelley? "I'm glad." She stared, swallowed. Did he ask about you?" Shelley nodded almost imperceptibly. She wanted to lie and tell her yes, but of course she wouldn't. She could speculate, however. "No, but when he came in the room, he glanced around, like he was looking for you. Or someone else." Her shoulders slumped, then immediately straightened as if fortifying herself. "I'm glad he's doing well. Would you come with us the next time?" Brand slanted a glare at her. What was that about? Did he want to go alone next time? It was unsettling how her ability to know what people were thinking or what they needed was faltering. Or maybe it was only with Brand. "No, I don't think so." Shelley turned away from them and began to walk down to her truck. Julia whipped around to follow, trotting a few steps to catch up. "Why not? I know he'd want to see you. You two are good friends, right?" Then, in a whisper for her ears only, "It looks to me you still love him." Shelley jerked her head toward Julia without missing a step, unlike Julia, who seemed to trip over every rise in the road. "That's not for all ears." They were far enough away from Brand to talk more freely now. "No one has to hear us." Shelley blew out a breath of exasperation, stepped up her pace until she got to her vehicle, then gasped. The front end was under water. "The water's still rising. I was on dry land when I parked here." Brand had caught up by then. "It's coming over the west levee. Look." He handed her the binoculars. Shelley gasped again upon seeing water overflowing the broken section of the west levee. "How long will it do that?" Julia looked to Brand for the answer. "Depends on the water the Snodgrass Slough is taking on from the Sacramento River, or even the Mokelumne. I'm surprised. It should have stopped by now. But until the water level is equal on both sides of the levee, it will keep flowing in." Poor Norman. Brand reached out and squeezed Shelley's shoulder. Shelley and I will watch it for him, but there's nothing that can be done at this point. A stabbing pain hit Julia right in the heart. Pure, unadulterated hurt and envy. Julia staggered under the weight of it. When you trusted God for everything, how could there be room for such a destructive emotion? "Norm seems a lot calmer than we are," Shelley said. "I wonder why. Seems nothing ruffles him." Julia felt herself creak back toward balance. "I think it's because he believes the ranch is in God's hands, just like his health and everything else." Brand just ignored her comments. That hurt for a second time. Brand was losing interest in her, and she was losing heart. "Trust," the voice inside her said. Yes, she needed to trust and wait. Right now, she needed an ally. "Let's get your truck out and go have a conversation with Norman." Brand nodded. "Seems like a good plan." He twisted around and jogged to his truck. Once he had backed down the levee road, hooked up Shelley's truck, and pulled her out of the water, Julia was more than ready for God to pull her out of her own floodwaters. She needed God to set her back on the right path and give her a much-needed shove. Chapter 34. Brand said his piece, then waited with a held breath.
"So she's still flooding, huh?"
Norman and Marie were sitting at the end of the sofa where he could reach his lemonade on the end table. Another sip, then he pinned his gaze on Brand, who sat across from him on a cushy chair, while Marie squeezed Norm's hand, her eyes softly studying her husband's face. Julia and Shelley looked on from the other end of the sofa. "Sorry, Norman." "Yes. Floodwaters are still coming through the breached levee. There won't be anything we can do until the slough water recedes enough for us to attempt repairs." Norman squeezed the back of his neck, then rubbed and exhaled.
"Yep. Afraid so. Well, I will be busy with chemotherapy for a few months, so timing couldn't be better."
Shelley's eyes went as wide with surprise as Brand's did. Julia seemed unaffected by Norman's casual attitude. Brand fumbled for words. How can you see it that way?"
"Trusting God, my boy. Nothing else to do."
Marie nudged him. "Yes, though you should have some of Carson's hands check the gates to your pipes. If the water gets too high, it can erode that levee, expose your pipes, and you'll have to start all over again rebuilding them. It would be best to open them, don't you think?" Norman gave Marie an endearing smile, his eyes twinkling with love.
"Not just beautiful, are you, wife? I'm sure the gates have already been opened. We'll see a difference once the water stops coming in from the slough."
He patted her hand with his free one. Brand jumped to his feet, alarming the group, and paced to the bank of windows overlooking Taylor's spread. There were deep puddles here and there, but no flooding. Nothing like what Harper West was going through. He plopped back down in the chair. Had their gates been opened? Norman seemed to think so. But who would have done that? Their dad was in Wyoming, and Herman, Gilbert, and Alfred were in Mexico. He, Brand, and Clay were the only ones who could have done it since the levee break. And they hadn't. Maybe he should call his dad back from Wyoming. He'd want to help Norman make the right decisions. Then again, Trevor was a bigger concern right now. Norman seemed to handle everything in stride. Trevor didn't seem able to anymore. Maybe he'd test that theory and hit Norman with a difficult truth. "This is bad luck. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, Norman, but somebody has to care enough to tell you this. Things are pretty bleak for the ranch."
"Now that's disappointing. From what I've heard from your brother, you're the positive twin. He tells me you charm everyone in order to bail him out of every bad situation."
Instant anger filled Brand's face with heat. "Yeah, that's about right."
Why, are you angry with him?
"Well, sure, wouldn't you be? Do you have brothers, Norman?"
Don't change the subject. What is making you angry with Bronc, my boy?"
Brand felt himself glower. Usually he could keep an expressionless face during confrontation. Today he seemed to have lost all control. "Are you serious? What do you think I'm mad at him about?"
"Well, not sure."
Norman took another swallow of his lemonade, then set it down, pulling Marie's hand into his lap, calm as he could be.
"You'll have to explain it to me."
"He's a drunk." That should shock Norman enough to make him understand. Brand had been taking care of his brother and his addiction for years, not to mention all his other shenanigans, and Brand found that he'd grown sick of it.
"Yes, and?"
That annoyed the heck out of him. Brand was the one who was supposed to out-calm everyone, think clearly, smile in the face of adversity. Why was Norman so different from any other man he'd ever known? Bronc and Julia thought it was all about God being in ultimate control. If it was, Brand needed to consider such a connection. Fighting this fight on his own was wearing him out, and obviously not working anymore. "I've had to take care of him our whole lives. It's time he does something on his own."
"Ah, so he's not doing well in rehab."
Brand didn't think he could frown any harder. Julia butted in. "He's doing great, Norm. You'd be proud. He looks wonderful. Sounds like he's getting along fine. He wants to come home, but that's normal. He asked about you." Julia was nearly springing off the seat, her blue eyes sparkling like Wyoming skies after a cleansing rain. Brand watched her with rapt interest. She was the most optimistic, big-hearted person he knew. It didn't hurt she was the prettiest girl he'd ever seen. He'd been trying not to notice such things, figuring she would always choose God over him anyway. So what was the point of being interested in her? He certainly shouldn't pursue her. Though he was trying hard to push her away, he couldn't quite be cruel enough to do it. The old standby of turning into Bronc for a time, being aloof and calloused enough to shut down the interest of a woman he no longer wanted to pursue, struck his heart as outrageously wrong. A new thought came out of nowhere. An alternative. What if you just get to know God? Win-win. Norman grinned and spoke, startling Brand out of his ruminations.
"That's fine, just fine. So, he's doing well then. Thank you, Jesus."
"Yes, thank you, Jesus," Julia mimicked. "What exactly are you getting at, Norm?" Brand's annoyance came through loud and clear.
"That our job isn't to judge. Our job is to love, to serve. And didn't Julia just tell me he was doing well in rehab?"
"Well, guess so." Norman gave Brand a sad smile, fixed his gaze on him so boldly that Brand felt himself fidget. When he started to speak, he leaned in some, causing Brand to do the same.
"Okay, I get it. You've been put out your whole life due to a wayward twin brother, and now he doesn't need you. Kind of rough, isn't that so?"
Brand took that hit, his heart stuttering a moment before smoothing back out.
"I can see you haven't thought those exact words, have you? You still think you need to watch over him, and no one will let you. It's a hard thing to realize God loves Bronc more than you do, and that Bronc recognizes God has taken over the job of watching out for him."
"What? No. I've always done it. Nothing's changed."
"Oh, but it has, my boy. Bronc is getting to know the Lord, and he's happy about that. He'll always love you, but he won't need you in the same way anymore. You should be relieved. But for someone who has been at this for as long as you have, it'll take some doing to let go. Never fear. God is with you."
Brand's breathing was jagged, even to his own ears. He couldn't seem to catch his breath. Norman got up and came to him, sat on the arm of the chair, and reached over to give Brand a hug around the head. A hug, of all things. Funny, he found himself sinking into that hug, felt his throat tighten. If he didn't stop himself, he was going to cry like a baby. Brand jerked out of Norman's arms to sit up straighter. He felt the muscles in his back tense. He matched them by contracting his jaw muscles to keep from blubbering. As soon as his throat worked, he was going to tell Norman how wrong he was. "I should go." Julia rose to her feet. "Will you walk me out, Brand?" He could only nod. Was she really needing to go, or was she saving him? There was that awareness and big heart of hers again. He stood. Julia leaned over Norman to give him a hug. "See you soon." She scooted over to the sofa and leaned over Marie next to give her a hug as well. "Bye, Marie. Take good care of Norman." "I will, sweet girl. Thank you for all the hours of scripture reading for him." "My pleasure. Truly." Brand gave Norman and Marie another nod, swallowed, then followed Julia out the front door, closed it with a snick, and guided her to her car. They stopped at the driver's side to stare into each other's eyes. The look of concern had her beautiful eyes drooping a little. "Do you want to sit in the car and talk about it?" Did he? The last thing he wanted to do was talk more. But he didn't want Julia to leave. The more he was around her, the more certain he was that he would never want her to leave. "Sure," he found himself saying. She let herself into the driver's side while he trod around the front bumper to the passenger door. It was comical trying to fold his big body into her small Valiant, but he finally managed it, though getting back out would be a chore. When he was finally in, slouching in order not to hit his head, he raised his eyes to her amused face. "What's so funny?" "Well, you. I didn't know if you were going to make it. My car is a sardine can for someone your size." She giggled. The twinkling sound eased Brand's turmoil. But still, how could God love Bronc more than his own identical twin could? And how would Bronc not need him anymore? The whole notion had him in knots, especially because he'd begun to feel some kind of bond with God, too. Julia giggled again. His answering grin began slowly, but he eventually managed to get one exposed. Her smile was gone as fast as it had arrived. "What's wrong?" "What do you mean, what's wrong?" "Nothing." "I've gotten to know you pretty well. Something is not right in the Brand Cooper world." He huffed a breath and stared out the front window. How could she read him like that? Sure, he was able to do that with others, but not many could. Still, what was the point of wedging his body in here with her if he wasn't going to be honest with her? He relented. "Norman. Every time I'm around him, all he does is preach to me." Once those words were out, he realized Julia would be on Norman's side. "Never mind. I don't want to talk about it." "Too late. We need to talk about it, Brand. Why are you afraid of God?" He raised a leg to stomp his foot, but just managed to ram his knee into the dashboard. He cursed under his breath to alleviate some tension. "I'm not afraid. Just don't think people should lean on an invisible God so much, is all." "He's not invisible as such. More like intangible." "And what's that supposed to mean?" "It means he is a spirit. though very much alive and active in our lives. Just because you can't see or touch him doesn't mean he's not here." She tapped her chest over her heart. She shifted, studied his face, then leaned forward and rubbed a palm down his arm. "But that's not what's bothering you, is it? It was Norman's words about how your brother doesn't need you anymore." Annoyance thundered. He didn't want this conversation. This time he got his leg just right so he could stomp the floor. The action didn't help. "He does need me." "Brand, Norman didn't mean Bronc won't need you as a brother or a friend, even as a fellow rancher. He meant he won't need to lean on you spiritually or emotionally anymore, or to control his addiction. Bronc is forming a relationship with God for that. That's all he meant." She continued to stroke his arm, partly relaxing him and partly ramping him up, sending him into madness. He didn't understand any of this. He just wanted his brother back in his midst so he could watch over him. Bronc would still need that, wouldn't he? Brand needed that, too. If God was so loving, why was he ripping his responsibility away? What would be his purpose now? Before he could object, her hand was in his hair, caressing, soothing. Could she see he was a wreck? "It's going to be all right. He'll be all right. So will you." How did she know he was worried about himself? Since when had he become so egocentric? He scrubbed both hands down his jeans, scraping the sweat from his palms. "Brand." If he looked at her, she'd see the hurt, the confusion. He didn't need her psychoanalyzing him. He was the counselor. They didn't need another. "Brand," she said again. This time her voice was lower, quieter, sympathetic. Fury raced up his spine and hit his cheeks with heat. He turned his head to look her in the eye and give her a piece of his mind. "What do you want from me, Julia? I don't have anything to say to you." Her head jerked back with hurt, but after a few long seconds, she narrowed her eyes. "You're not going to succeed in pushing me away. I know you're hurting. Let me be here for you. Please." She scraped her nails through his hair, then palmed the nape of his neck, rubbing and rubbing. "Julia." "No, Brand. Don't talk me out of helping you. You need me." "You should stop that." But her hand kept going, kneading his neck, her elbow dragging across his spine as she rubbed. Did she not understand what he meant? She needed to stop touching him. If he didn't crave her so much, he would bang his way back out of this tin can of a car and escape. Leave these dratted emotions and needs behind. It was too late. Before either of them could say another phrase, Brand turned his head and took her lips in his, shocking her and himself. She started to wrench back, but it was as if his body took over, not letting his mind or hers interrupt its plan. He slid his right hand into her hair, holding her in place. Her lips were warm and soft, as he knew they would be. He teased with a few tugs and a nip, then pushed forward, sinking in to deepen the contact. She seemed to melt into it. When she tugged backwards again, this time he released her. But instead of sitting back, she slid both her hands into his hair, coaxing him closer, holding him as he'd been holding her. She mimicked his lead, placing her lips on his again, taking over. Fast learner. But because she was, it was taking them into dangerous territory. Brand eased back and ended the kiss with a chaste peck on her full lips, then one on her pert nose. Their hands remained in each other's hair, both still stroking and smoothing down the strands they had mussed up. Until reason showed up. Kissing Julia meant choosing her, and, if he chose her, he'd be expected to have God wrapped up in their lives. Would he be okay with that? He withdrew his hands from her hair. Then came the guilt. His airway clogged. All he could say was, "See you." Then, thrusting his door open, he bumped and jounced his way out of Julia's car. Once he was free, he gave her a subtle wave, then backed several steps until he was sure she got his message. Time to leave. He stood stiffly as she focused ahead and started her car, then drove off. Brand swallowed hard, reliving the kiss, then forcing himself to relive the moment Julia had stopped him from kissing her the first time he tried. The reason? She thought him an unbeliever in her God. It wasn't true, he realized now. He only believed the God of all creation didn't want to be bothered with the everyday details of human lives. But he believed, all right. He knew God existed. It was God who had taken his mom home too soon, after he and his twin were born. It was God who kept their father too busy to raise his sons properly. It surprised and disgusted him that his believing brothers had forgotten this. He hadn't. Acted like he had, but he hadn't. And worse than that, they forgave their dad and God, and wanted both in their lives. God was a cruel God. Brand had always prided himself on being strong enough not to choose him, but he felt his resolve slipping inside, and that would change everything. Chapter 35. It had been a few weeks since he'd last seen Brand, but Bronc had been busy with his recovery. He knew Brand wouldn't be happy when he canceled their weekly visits, but he didn't want special treatment. No one else was entitled to such frequent visits. Neither should he be. Besides, he figured his twin had only set those up to relieve him of feeling overwhelmed or lonely at the facility. He missed his brother, sure, but awoke every day now, looking forward to his Bible devotion, the breakfast he helped cook, and a vigorous basketball game with the other men. The only downside was his worry for Norman and his aching for Shell. He expanded his chest in a deep breath, feeling better than he had in, well, ever. Today he and a handful of recovery hopefuls were being driven to Taylor Ranch to begin their work schedule. He was looking forward to working outdoors again. Toiling in the dirt and even mucking stalls would feel like heaven. But seeing the faces of Shell, Norman, and Brand when he arrived would be the highlight of his month. If Shell would even want to see him. He was surprised she hadn't talked her dad out of participating in the program. Maybe she had forgiven him. He could only hope. As Pastor drove them down the long drive toward the sprawling ranch house, Bronc pulled in another deep breath through his nose. He had missed the fresh air of the great outdoors after a cleansing rain. Even the cattle and crop smells came through now that the rain had let up, and the alcohol had been purged from his system. He couldn't wait to get started, anxious to use muscles that had leaned out and test a mind that had been cleared of the fog of addiction. But as the ranch drew closer, Bronc found his anticipation dampened by melancholy. This ranch reminded him of Shell. He missed her, soul deep, and he had left their relationship in shambles. Pastor brought them to a stop outside the large house. Carson Taylor strode up to the 1950 Chevrolet Short school bus the church had inherited from the Lodi Lincoln Grammar School. It was the perfect size for carting around the work crew. Pastor swung the double doors open and hopped out to shake Mr. Taylor's hand.
"Good of you to be here, all of you," the rancher's voice boomed.
and his grin was so contagious, every one of the men smiled back as they exited, even the irritable ones. Bringing up the rear, Bronc stood to exit the bus, trying to keep from scanning the surroundings, trying not to look desperate or distracted. He fixed his gaze on Mr. Taylor and stepped onto solid ground, hand extended, and immediately squeezed in the man's warm grip. Then Mr. Taylor pulled him in close, rested his free hand on Bronc's shoulder, and said softly, "You look good, my boy." "Oh, thank you, sir," Bronc said. He couldn't stand it any longer. He glanced over the rancher's shoulder for Shell and his family, but there was no one. "No need to call me sir. Boss will do." He laughed, and Bronc chuckled. "Well, yes, sir, boss, sir." They laughed again. Disappointed as Bronc was, it still felt good to enjoy a moment with this good man, the one who had helped Norman so much through the years. Mr. Taylor spoke to the group. "Come, I'll show you around, and then lay out your duties. Follow me." Scanning the front and side doors of the house as he walked past, Bronc lingered in the back of the group, hoping Shelley would show. He figured he'd see his brother soon enough, and Norman. Shell was the one he longed to see most, but he couldn't justify waiting any longer, so he jogged to catch up with the others. When they reached one of the many barns, Mr. Taylor turned to face them. 2 other men had joined them, and Bronc recognized them as 2 of Mr. Taylor's foremen. "Ed here will take 2 of you with him to feed the Harper livestock. You'll do that daily, and Ray and I will take the other 6. Bronc, you have the most height and girth, so I'm putting you to work in the barn moving hay bales for me." "You got it." Bronc grinned, then watched the others lumber off before following Mr. Taylor into their largest barn. He'd been here many times in the past, with Shelley, but had never dreamed he'd be working here, especially under these circumstances. A glance back at the house told him Shell had yet to emerge. Shoulders slumped, he faced her father again. Maybe he'd see her at lunchtime. Please, God, let that be the case. Thankfully, heavy physical labor took Bronc's mind off the disappointment of Shelley's indifference. By late morning, he felt thirst take over. He'd been working for over 3 hours now and had shed his shirt. Sweat streamed down his torso despite the cooler temperatures. He found his way to the rain barrel and sank in head and shoulders before cupping his hands for a drink. "They do have a scooper for that, you know." Bronc shook his head of the excess streams of water, then looked toward the speaker. "Brother!" Brand stood straight and tall with his hands at his waist, sleeves pushed haphazardly up past his elbows, hat shoved onto his brow, lips flattened in anger. "Nice to finally see you." Bronc grabbed up a barn towel next to the barrel and rubbed his face and hair with it. He grinned. "You miss me?" Brand's stare morphed into a scowl. "Why'd you cancel my visits?" Tossing the towel onto the fence, Bronc stepped closer to his twin. "Been busy. You wanted me to fit in. Now I do. Want a hug?" He swung his arms open wide. Brand was as sweaty as he was, but hadn't shed his shirt. "No thanks." "Didn't miss me then? What's going on with you? Was it punishment for me? Or you?" Bronc heaved a breath. He needed to let his brother off the hook. Truth was, he was renewed at the home. Brand needed to know that. But before he could spill the news, their attention was drawn to a car heading up the long drive toward them. Looked to be Julia in her Valiant. "There's your girl." Not too sure about that. Bronc tore his gaze from the little car back to his brother. "Why? What'd you do?" Brand dropped his hands to his side in defeat. "Don't want to talk about it. What I do want to talk about is why you canceled my visits. Out with it." "You haven't even asked me how I am. Don't you want to know?" "Well, of course I do."
How are you?"
"Good. Great. After getting past the first torturous weeks, it's been sobering."
"Is that a rehab joke?"
Bronc laughed. Brand didn't join him. "In all seriousness, it's been humbling and awe-inspiring." "I'm good." Julia parked nearby and, with excitement written all over her face, came bounding toward them. She looked beautiful, as always. Retrieving his hat from a hay bale, Bronc pushed it on his head, then tipped it at her. "How are you, Jules? Good to see you." Julia scanned Bronc's body from dirty hat to the speckled hay on his boots, lingering briefly on his naked, waterlogged torso. Bronc gave her a lopsided grin, guaranteed to tick off his brother. And sure enough, Brand glared. "I'd give you a hug, Bronc, but I think I'll pass." She laughed. Bronc laughed with her. A glance at his brother told him Brand's glare had softened. He looked like he'd left their dimension, absorbed in her laughter, her beautiful face. Her cheeks were the shade of raspberries, the same color as her adorable large-buttoned A-frame coat. The blush was likely from the cold, or maybe from something else entirely. Bronc looked from Brand to Julia and back again. Something had grown here. While Brand was busy staring at Julia, she hadn't even glanced at him. "It's so good to see you, Bronc. How's it going at the home? I've been so busy with plans to visit other churches and fundraising that I haven't had a chance to look in on you. But since I set up the work crews, I know where you'd be today. You look wonderful." "Do I? Even wearing hay and sweat?" Bronc laughed again. She was still grinning. "You do. So good. I see Mr. Taylor put you to work in the barn. I thought you'd be out in the field with the others." "Yeah, I did too, especially since that's the kind of work I did back home and for Norman." He smiled. "Your dad read a verse out of Genesis to us this morning." He dropped his gaze to the ground, trying to recall. "Let's see if I can remember it." Then to Adam he said, "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, 'You shall not eat from it,' cursed is the ground because of you. With hard labor you shall eat from it all the days of your life." "That's amazing, Bronc. You remembered the whole thing." "Yeah, toiling in the dirt. Our consequences for what Adam did." Then he couldn't help but smile. But who knew man would learn to love toiling in the dirt? I know I do. Well, that's great for men. But just think, we women must toil in childbirth because of what Eve did. And I'm pretty sure I will not enjoy that. They laughed together again. Man, that felt good. Discussing the Bible and God was freeing him more every day. "I'm going to help the other men," Brand said with a sneer, then turned for the field where the foreman had taken the others. Bronc had never seen his amical brother so testy. As he strode stiffly toward his destination, Bronc stared at his back. "What's going on with him? He can't be that mad at me for canceling our visits." Julia stared on in silence until Brand was just a small silhouette in the distance. Her head was tilted to the side. "No, I don't think that's it. What? What's going on, Jules?" She turned toward him but didn't look him in the eye. Now he knew something was up. He waited, watched her face pink up. "Is this about you and him?" "Maybe." Bronc wanted to demand an answer so he could fix the problem. But if he'd learned anything at all during his time in rehab, it was that God was in control, and we only found ourselves in a pile of grief when we went before him. He had a lot to learn, but that was one lesson he'd learned the hard way too often in life. He was done trying to do things his way. He'd proven that it didn't work. Do you have feelings for him? Yes. Her face filled with color as her gaze jerked away from him. He figured she hadn't meant to spew that out. He should throw her a bone. The old Bronc wouldn't have bothered. The new Bronc wanted to be a better man. Besides, maybe he could get a woman's perspective on his problem. It's okay, Jules. I get it. I have feelings for someone, too. Her head whipped back in surprise. Did she think he was incapable of feelings? Once she studied his eyes, as Brand always did when psychoanalyzing people, the corners of her mouth tipped up. Shelley, right? He exhaled, no sense holding back. Right. Her mouth continued to rise into a grin. I knew it. Was it that obvious? Well, to me, yes. She feels the same way, you know. If she did, she doesn't anymore. She won't talk to me. Yeah. Why is that anyway? Julia's delicate brows pulled together. We tried to get her to come with us to see you. She made excuses, wouldn't come. What happened between you two? Should he open up to her? She'd be willing to pray with him. That thought would have disturbed him in the past. Now he couldn't think of a better solution. When Brand and Shelley first took me to the recovery home, I was angry with them. Julia sucked in a breath to speak. He held up a hand to stop her. Yes, I had decided to go. They didn't cross that line, didn't force me. But once I was there and started sobering up a bit, Shell came in to say goodbye. I was disgraceful, mean to her. No, I was cruel to her. I said some terrible things, part of which I don't remember exactly. He rubbed a finger across his brow. No, that's not true. I do remember what I said. I've thought about it enough. It was bad, Jules. Very bad. You mean you hurt her soul deep? Yes. And you tried to get in touch? Called when they let me. She wouldn't come to the phone. I've written her a couple of letters of apology. Don't know what she did with those. She hasn't come to visit. And she hasn't come out here today to say hello. Says it all, don't you think? I've talked to her recently, Bronc. She has feelings for you. She's just hurt. You must go to her. Go in and see her at lunch. Take her outside to talk. I'll try. Good. I won't keep you. You should get back to work. Lunch will be ready around 1. Go in when you're hungry. Bronc spent the next 2 hours lifting bales and praying, equally. Lift a bale? Give me the words to say to her, Lord. Cart the bale across the barn? Help her to accept my apology. Place the bale on the next stack. Restoring our relationship, Jesus, so we can build from there. The peace praying gave him was extraordinary. By the time he was done stacking, his spirit had rallied. He was ready to face his girl. Yes, his girl. Bronc strode out of the barn and saw the others coming in from the fields. Time for lunch. After dunking himself in the rain barrel again, drying off as best he could, and redressing, he headed for the house. With each step, the dread circled in his gut. Shell was a strong woman. If she didn't want to see him again, there'd be nothing he could do about it. Her strength was a big part of why his interest in her had grown. The fact she was easy on the eyes didn't hurt. Dirt, hay, and all. But most of her appeal was her heart. She had cared for him and protected him through months of spiraling, drunken soul paralysis. Now that he was whole, He yearned to give her the very best of himself. But would she want a former addict? He had no doubt he'd beaten the addiction, since even the thought of whiskey threatened to make him heave his guts out. But he wasn't stupid. Alcoholism would hang over him like a black cloud just waiting for the right time to rain down. The enemy would use this weakness if he could. As the Bible said, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." Though he struggled with the flesh and had a potent adversary, he also knew there was a loving God that would help him every step of the way. All he needed to do was ask. Chapter 36. Donning his dirty flannel shirt, and with one last scrape of his fingers through his wet hair, Bronc opened the back door and let himself into Taylor's home. Searching for a boot tree, he relieved himself of his boots, as he did without thought back home, dropped his hat onto a coat rack, then with damp socks, padded into the kitchen. Shelley was busy at the counter, slathering bread with mayonnaise and mustard, then slapping on meats and cheeses until she had filled the third plate of sandwiches 4 high. Bronc leaned against the door jamb with his arms crossed as he watched, his heart swelling with the vision she made. He could picture her making sandwiches for only him one day, or possibly for a passel of kids. Their kids. An apron was tied tight around her splendid body, her thick hair caught up in a ponytail. It swung about her face as she busied herself with her task. She was makeup-free and the most fine-looking woman he'd ever laid eyes on. This was the first time he'd been able to gaze at her unfettered by alcohol and arrogance. He'd almost forgotten what a natural beauty she was. Almost. "Hey there." She jumped and turned at the same time, her ponytail whipping the side of her neck. Eyes wide and mouth stuck open. She only stared, as if Charlton Heston had just walked in to greet her. "You okay?" He chuckled, dropping his arms and taking 2 steps toward her. She backed a step, colliding with the counter. "Bronc." Disappointment clawed into him for a moment, but he couldn't let her reaction get to him. Instead, he concentrated on how magnificent his name sounded coming from her mouth. He hadn't heard that voice in weeks, hadn't realized how much he'd missed her husky warmth. He lowered his own voice. "How are you, Shell?" "I'm—" The rest of her words got stuck in her mouth, so she whipped back to her task. She cleared her voice. "Are you hungry?" She seemed nervous. "Famished." "Good, good. There are a lot of sand—" "Shell, look at me," he interrupted. Her motions stopped. She squeezed her eyes shut. But in the next moment, her hands continued their task. "I will have these on the table in a minute. Then I'll grab the lemonade. Have a seat." "Shell." Again she stopped and blinked this time. 2 slow blinks, her gaze locked to the top sandwich. "Please, look at me." Her hands came to the counter, almost as if she needed its stability to push her around to face him. When she did, ever so slowly she raised her chin, then brought her striking brown eyes up to meet his. She set her pretty mouth in a grim line and waited. "I owe you an apology." Back in motion, she turned swiftly and grabbed up one of the platters of sandwiches. "You don't owe me anything, Bronc." Then she moved, carrying the food to the large dining room table adjacent to the kitchen. She leaned in to set the plate down, her hands trembling in the process. Once the plate was placed, she scrubbed both hands down the sides of her jeans and went back to the kitchen to gather more. He didn't offer to help, instinctively knowing she needed to busy herself. Bronc let her finish settling the last platter, but when she turned to go back to the kitchen, he was there, stopping her progress, grasping her wrist as she tried to scoot by. "Shell, listen to me. I was in a terrible place. I didn't mean what I said to you." She stiffened against his hold, but at least didn't yank her hand back. "What did you say to me, Bronc? I don't remember." That was the game she'd play? He tilted his head and lifted a brow. "You do." "No, I really don't. And I don't think you do either." The truth was, he did remember most of it. Had there been more? Would he be able to apologize for something he couldn't recall? "You don't. I can see it in your eyes. You're trying to remember what you said that day." She slowly tugged her hand out of his grasp. "Well, if we neither one remembers what was said, there's nothing to apologize for. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish up the meal." "Shell!" The back door banged open. "We're here!" Mr. Taylor's voice hollered from the mudroom, followed by the muffled voices of many more. "I brought the hungry gang with me." That was the end of their conversation. Bronc wished he'd had a few more minutes with her, alone, but it wasn't in the cards. Well, that was a saying he should stop using, or thinking. It wasn't in God's plan, and he had to learn to wait on God's timing. Brand was the first through the kitchen door. "Where's Julia?" "Well, hello to you too, Brand." Shelley picked up the pitcher of lemonade. "Hello, Shelley. Where's Julia?" "I don't know. I haven't seen her." "She didn't come in and help with lunch?" "No. Is her car still here?" "Yes. I just walked past it. Where would she go?" Shelley shook her head, then snapped her fingers. "Oh, I know. I bet she's with Norman and Marie. She may have taken them their lunch. She probably came through when I was in the bathroom earlier. Norm and Marie are in the family room watching a television show." Without another word or a greeting for him, Brand strolled past everyone to head to the family room in the back of the house. "Looks upset," Mr. Taylor said to his daughter as he took the pitcher from her, striding over to the long table. "Sandwiches look good. Everyone take a seat." Shelley was frowning. Her father noticed. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll all wash up outside." Bronc knew she wasn't disturbed by the hand-washing. It was him she was upset with. He approached her, mindful of the cold space between them, respectful of her right to be angry. The room grew loud with the clink of plates and the rumble of male conversation. Bronc leaned down a hair and said softly, "Can I see you outside?" Shelley gave him a side glance, skepticism clear in her eyes. "Why?" "Why, indeed?" He didn't know what more he could say to her, but he had to try. He wanted this woman in his life. He had to know if she'd give this sorry excuse for a man a chance. If it hadn't been for his growing relationship with a loving God, he wouldn't make the effort, wouldn't feel worthy enough for her. But God loved all his children. He had created every one of them so he could enjoy them, protect them, and redeem them, and Bronc was one of them. He knew that now. To talk. "Talk?" "Yes. Come with me." Her frown was back. "Please?" She began to move, but had only taken a few steps before she stopped at the table. "Is there anything else I can get you men?" They all spoke over the top of each other, thanking her and assuring her they had everything they needed. When she finally moved toward the mudroom, Bronc backed out of the way to let her go ahead of him. Shell grabbed a jacket on her way out. Bronc stomped into his boots and followed her. She walked around the corner of the house and stopped next to a hedge. The clouds overhead had pulled together in a dark cluster. Looked like rain. Felt like dread. "Okay, I'm here. What do you want?" Her voice was abrupt, but then Bronc hadn't expected anything less. She was still hurt. He got that. He was appalled at his own cruelty, and after they'd shared a kiss, too. He only hoped they could come back from this. He wanted to take her hands in his. Instead, he stuffed his in his pockets. "Shell, I'm listening." The way she was looking at him made him lose his nerve. Her expression told him she was only tolerating this little talk. He doubted words were going to cut it. He yearned to take one of her hands between his, get her to look him in the eye so she could see his humble intent. Just as he was about to reach for her, she sighed, then began to speak. "Look, Bronc, I appreciate the apology. I do. But it doesn't change a thing." "Meaning what?" "Meaning, if you were able to say those things to me, then deep down you believed every word." "You're wrong." He did grab for her then, caught her by the upper arms, and pulled her to him, the words he was about to say making him more aggressive than he intended. "I was drunk, out of control. Trust me, Shell." She tugged at her arms, but didn't try very hard, so he held fast. "How can I trust you, Bronc? Tell me how." "I'm a different man now. Rehab has changed me. A relationship with our Creator has changed me. You have to believe that." Shelley couldn't believe her ears. Could this man have changed so much? Could she believe him? Trust him as he wanted her to? She didn't think so. She wanted to, but she just wasn't made that way. Her heart had been shattered that day at the recovery home. Not just once, but repeatedly with each vile word he had spewed. She'd lied when she told him she didn't remember. She did. Painfully. "I thought you cared about me. You're a liar if you say you do. Now you turn on me? Betray me?" If those had been the only words he'd thrown at her, she might have recovered. But the next set had done something to her heart. They had killed the vital part that loved. "This is hate, Sean. Hate. And do you know what? That's what I'm feeling right now. I cared about you. Now I know better. Get out of my life, rebel, and don't come back. I don't want to see your face again." "Shelley, my sweet rebel." My sweet rebel. Hearing that nickname used endearingly just after the memory of the last time he'd used it turned her stomach. Maybe that was part of his recovery program. Go to those you'd hurt as a drunk and make amends. "You've said your part. Apologized. Well, rest assured, you're forgiven. I have to go in." She scooted away and brushed past him, heading for the back door. "Shelley, wait!" She stopped. If she didn't give him his say, she would regret it. She knew herself. In the wee hours of the night, as she lost sleep, her mind would bring her back to this conversation. And if she hadn't handled it right, she would regret it. She turned ever so slowly. "What more can you say?" He paused. Too long. She squeezed her eyes closed before opening them and centering on his. He looked confused, his eyes darting about at anything but her. Her heart went out to him. He was too newly recovered. She feared that he didn't know what he wanted and worried her rejection now would set him back. At least, she would send him on his way with kind words. "I pray you do well in rehab, Bronc." And then she turned to go. Not another word came from him. Her heart crushed a little more. Chapter 37. Brand stepped into the family room at the back of the Taylor home, seeing Norman, Marie, and Julia sitting together on the sofa, laughing at something coming from the big brown box across the room. Television wasn't something he had time for, so he had no clue what could be so funny. It didn't matter. The joy of hearing Julia's laughter started in his ears and winged its way throughout his body. He could listen to the melodic tinkling all day. After watching and listening for a spell while being utterly ignored, he finally came forward. "What you watching?" Norman looked up, startled. Had he been that quiet? Or had Norm been too engrossed in the program to hear him come in?
"Oh, hey there, my boy. How you doing?"
"Art Linkletter's house party," Julia said. "Specifically, the kids say the darndest things portion. It's hilarious, and laughter is the best medicine. Right, Norm?" Julia elbowed Norman, and they laughed again. Well, Brand would be sure to play this program every week to hear Julia's adorable giggle. That is, if she was willing to be with him. After their last encounter, he wasn't at all sure. "Sit down." She patted the seat next to her. "Watch with us." Surprised to be asked, he planted himself right next to her, so close she had to shift to free her thigh from beneath him. After the heated kiss they'd shared and his cold send-off afterward, he found himself grateful for her relationship with the Almighty. He couldn't think of another reason for such a forgiving spirit. Minutes passed as all three remained entranced by Art Linkletter's show. Chuckles and giggles boomed to wild laughter. During a particularly funny scene, Julia grabbed Brand's hand and squeezed to make sure he was watching. He was, but mostly he made sure he kept his hand palm up so he could get a better grasp of hers. They sat that way for the rest of the show. "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Art Linkletter asked a little boy. "A pilot," the boy said. "Well, let's say you're flying a big plane and all 4 engines stop at the same time. What would you do?" Mr. Linkletter asked. The boy dropped his chin and closed his eyes. "Our Father, which art in heaven," the 4 adults watching burst out laughing. "Can I talk to you?" Bronc said from the doorway. All of them jumped at his booming voice. Brand hadn't even heard his brother come in. Now he understood why no one had heard him. The program was so entertaining they'd all been sucked in. Brand glanced up. Bronc's face said it all. He'd seen that same look in the mirror many a time. His brother was distressed. "Sure. What's up?" Bronc glanced at Brand and Julia's clasped hands, then up to Brand's eyes. "Can we talk outside?" "I'll be right back." Brand patted the back of Julia's hand after releasing it, then leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. Her face pinked up, but she didn't say a word, just nodded. Bronc followed his brother out the front door to the 2 Adirondack chairs sitting on the porch. "Want to sit?" "No." Bronc paced up and down the porch 2 times before stopping in front of Brand. "I'm in trouble." What in the world did Bronc do in such a short time since arriving? But Brand didn't doubt it could happen. Bronc had caused trouble in less time before. "What happened?" His voice sounded agitated, even to his own ears. "I need your help." "Okay. With what?" "I need you to be me." Brand blinked once, hard. "Why?" "I blew it with Shelley. I need you to fix it." "Bronc, no, listen to me. You can do this. She'll listen to you. She'll trust you. I dug a bigger hole for myself. I need you to get me out." Now Brand began to pace up, then back to stand before Bronc. "We haven't done this since we were kids. It's not funny anymore. It's not doable. She'll know it's not you. No, see, I think she won't. We'll change clothes right now. That will throw her off. She just talked to me. She won't overthink it. She'll just recognize the clothes and react to me. But you. Brand scrubbed a hand down his face and blew out a breath. Gad, brother. I thought we were past all these juvenile pranks. He wanted to shout, "Grow up," but didn't dare. Bronc was still fragile. He needed to tread lightly. Could he help? First, tell me what you said exactly. She's still upset because I was cruel to her at the recovery home. When you first dropped me off, I tried to talk to her today, and she said there was nothing to be said. That if I said those things to her then, I had to mean them deep down. I don't, Brand. I didn't mean a dang thing. I was just upset to be left there. And drunk. Why did you have to take it out on her? You had me there. You could have yelled at me. Brand found himself whisper yelling, making sure no one overheard. But he was furious with Bronc. Why couldn't he keep himself in check? That blasted temper. Please, Brandon, I need your help. Okay, give me a minute. I have to think of what I can say to her. Bronc's grateful smile filled Brand with purpose. Bronc still needed him. Maybe all would be well after all. Let's go switch clothes. Yuck, man, you stink. And your clothes are wet from sweat and rain barrel water. Do you think you smell better? Cattle and open range smell a lot better than cooped-up barn and sweat. Ha! I can't believe you were sitting so close to Julia after working all morning. About Julia. You are not taking my seat next to her. It won't take long. We'll change back, and I'll return to her once I'm done. Got it? Bronc smirked. Sure, whatever you say. I mean it. Promise me. Fine, I promise. Now what are you going to say to Shell? The first thing I'm going to do is call her Shelley, not a name that sounds like it belongs to one of the guys. You'd be wise to do the same. Bronc nodded and gave him a small smile. You'd be proud. I already have. Okay, let's go out to the bunkhouse and change. But zip it. I need to think. You got it. Not more than 15 minutes later, Brand looked Bronc over. You actually look respectable now. Enjoy it. You're the better-looking brother for a short time. Dream on, Tonto. We've always known I'm the best-looking brother. Where's Shelley? Go practice being me and send her outside to talk to Bronc. If you can pull that off, this might work. Bronc gave him a thumbs up, bounced on his toes as he'd seen Brand do many times before heading out a door, then grinned over his shoulder to let him know he knew how to be him. Then he sauntered calmly toward the front door to find Shelley. As he entered, he racked his brain. Had Brand taken his boots off before? No. The answer was no. So he didn't either. Sure enough, he found Shelley quietly doing dishes in the kitchen while the men were enjoying a platter of cookies she must have brought to them. Her long hair, still in a ponytail, was swishing at the back of her delicate nape as she worked. The fine hairs were damp from the heat of the sudsy dishwater, distracting him. He wanted to come up behind her, take that thick ponytail in hand, and kiss the beads of sweat off her neck. He smashed his eyes closed for a few beats, trying to control his emotions and his thoughts. Okay, I can do this. Hey there, Shelley. Bronc needs to talk to you outside. Shelley's brows knitted together in the middle as she turned to look at him. Her chocolate brown eyes turned darker still. Did she already know? He'd done his best to push his hair to the back since it was their only difference currently. He hadn't bothered to cut it. Currently, it hung behind his ears and down his neck, near his collar. She stood completely still and stared into his eyes. Shoot, shoot, shoot. She knows. What does he want? He let out the breath he was holding, trying to camouflage it with a cough. Charm it up. Don't know. Just told me to come get you. It was a chore to be this good-humored. I'll do the dishes. It's no problem. I do them at home all the time. At the Bar 6, I mean. While grumpy old Bronc is out digging post holes, I'm usually inside helping the ladies. He grinned and winked, certain he was convincing. All that sugar was rotting his teeth. Gad, how did Brand stay so jovial? She wiped her hands on a hand towel while she breathed through several big breaths. Trying to calm herself, gather her nerve. Part of him was glad she might be nervous because of him. Shelley threw the towel down on the counter and headed for the mudroom. A few seconds later, he heard the door open and close. Brand heard the back door bang shut. Then Shelley came into view around the corner of the house. He stiffened. Could he pull this off? When they were kids, he and Bronc switched places all the time. It was a hoot when the people they tried to fool were duped. But when they weren't, they got in big trouble with their dad. Part of that apprehension still lived in him. Shelley walked right up to him, but the minute she stood in front of him, she seemed to wilt. He delved into those deep brown eyes of hers, saw her apprehension, but more importantly, her pain. What is it, Bronc? Well, now he legitimately wanted to help her. Use your head, Brand. Do this for your brother. He held up one finger. Please, can I have just 1 minute? There was a long pause. You think there's more to be said? Fear seemed to ride her expression now. How cruel had Bronc been that she thought he might do it again right now? Or maybe the words he'd said had just hit way harder than he'd thought. Shame on him. Brand kept his eyes glued to hers, but didn't say a word. No one could stand that kind of pressure. He waited for her to give in. Long seconds passed. It was hard to do when you knew how much Bronc had hurt her. Fine. 1 minute. She held up one finger, copying him. He tried not to show his relief. My heart has been thumping in my chest since you walked away earlier. He swallowed hard. If he messed this up for Bronc, he'd never forgive himself, since Bronc would never forgive him. He took 2 steps closer. If he reached out, he'd be able to touch her. Please accept my apology. I have. I told you. You're forgiven. Drat. Bronc hadn't told him that part. True, but I want more. He reached out and caught her hand, held it despite her tug. You are my life. She gasped, eyes widening. I'm in love with you, Shelley. Brand stopped short, reeling from a sudden epiphany. If this was Julia he stood before, the words he'd said couldn't be truer. Why isn't that enough? Shelley yanked her hand from him, plastered a scowl on her face, and stepped back. Brand shook his head from the realization he was completely committed to Julia. Shelley stared at him for so long he wondered if Bronc was totally wrong about their relationship. He'd read women wrong before. This sure as heck wouldn't be the first time. She crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes. Are you sure he'd want you to say those words, Brand? Chapter 38. Shelley remained frozen to the spot, wondering what these twins were up to. Brand dropped both hands to his sides, slumped his shoulders. When did you know? Actually, only since his confession of love. But she wasn't about to tell Brand that. Do you think I can't tell you two apart? Anyone who knows you can, you know. You're not fooling anyone. Maybe that would keep them from doing it again. Brand scrubbed both hands up his face and into his hair. He linked his hands on top of his head and kept them there. We used to, Shelley snorted. When you were kids? Yeah. Well, it doesn't work anymore. Why are you doing this? Brand unlinked his hands and let them drop. Everything I said to you is what Bronc is feeling. Trust me. Trust you? She laughed. After what you just pulled? Okay, fine. Don't trust me. Just know Bronc is crazy about you. He was desperate for me to help him. I couldn't tell him no. Because you're worried about him. Mostly. Also because I can see how he feels about you. I know how that feels. Because you're in love with Julia. He hesitated, his expression one of despair. Then he nodded. Why did he look so distraught about his love for Julia? She would worry about that later. You need to go back to Bronc and tell him to move on from me. He crushed me, Brand. Her eyes stung as tears formed. She wouldn't let them fall. She just knew she couldn't be that pariah again. She was innocent. She didn't betray people. I can't go through that again. Brand searched her eyes. She felt his stare clear down to her toes. You can't be with a former drunk? He asked. No, it's not the drinking. My love for him never faltered through those months Tony drove him home to me. The possibility of him drinking again doesn't scare me, but his words do, and what they would do to us. And you think he could start drinking and be cruel to you? It's possible. No. I think his words to you crushed him too, Shelley. Drunk or not, I don't think his subconscious would allow him to say anything of the sort to you again. She laughed painfully, grabbed a hanging branch off the hedge, and began stripping one dead leaf after the other off it. Oh, that's right, I forgot. You're the psychologist of the family. Did Bronc tell you that? Yeah. During one of those nights where I held him in the truck and he was more alert than usual. Maybe she shouldn't tell Brand about those times. You can believe me, Shelley. I've never seen my brother like this. He is beside himself with love for you. I don't know what he'll do if he can't get through to you. Can you just listen to what he has to say? Give him a chance? I'm going over to Harper West to check on the flooding. She turned away and started walking. No, stay here. Let me get him. She shook her head, unable to speak around the lump in her throat, and kept walking toward the barn where they kept the ranch trucks. She loved Bronc. She did. But her doubts about them as a couple were so overwhelming, she didn't think she could get past them. She learned long ago she wasn't any good at recovering from toxic words. Shelley, please. She guessed she should give him something. I'll be back. We'll talk then. You shouldn't go alone. I'm just going to look and take a walk. She called over her shoulder. I'll be fine. The rumble of a car engine brought Shelley's head around. She stopped and waited until she saw a black Cadillac 62 sedan on approach up the long driveway. She recognized that car, rocking back on her heels automatically as it pulled up nearly on top of Brand. The nerve. Brand leaned down to peer through the driver's window. This was her home, her territory, and her right to send Stephen Anderson, real estate developer, on his merry way. Then again, Bronc had refused to really notice her until this guy drove to Harper West and flirted with her all those weeks ago. Maybe she owed him a minute of her day. At the mogul's slick smile, her inner magnanimity shifted to anger. This was the perfect opportunity to see if Bronc would still be jealous. "Brand Cooper, meet Stephen Anderson. He's a real estate developer from the Bay Area. He's interested in Harper Ranch West." She looked back at Stephen. "Or are you still?" "It's in bad shape at the moment, but yes, we're still interested. How are you, Shelley? It's good to see you again." Stephen unlatched his door, waiting until they both backed out of the way to stand and face them. He stuck out his hand to Brand. "Good to meet another Cooper. Twins, huh?" Brand shook his hand with a nod and a concerned frown as Stephen looked back at Shelley and said, "Can I take you to dinner? Doesn't look like Norman is interested in selling yet, but we can discuss our company's plans for the whole area. There are other landowners on the Snodgrass Slough we have attracted." "Why would you be talking to Shelley about this? Her dad is inside. Norman and Marie are too." Brand glowered at the man, reminding Shelley of just how Bronc looked the last time he had seen Mr. Anderson. "Oh, I think I'll enjoy her company more. I'll talk to them about the plans later. What do you say, Shelley? I've been curious about the famous Al the Wop's restaurant in Locke, and I hear Jutsi is a pretty good place to eat." She wanted to agree, to see how Bronc would react when Brand filled him in. But alas, that was a foolish idea. Why upset him when she was telling him goodbye? Why indeed? Sorrow filled her. "Well, what do you think?" Stephen gained a few steps toward her as she backed the same number. The back door slammed open, and Bronc strode outside, eyes locked on this intruder. If these twins thought they fooled anyone with their switcheroo, Bronc's gait alone would tell the truth. His head led the way, while his fists opened and closed, each step longer than the last. As he steamrolled toward them, Shelley wondered if he'd still play the part of Brand. He stopped only feet from the interloper, far surpassing the man's height and brawn. "You want to let yourself off this property, or shall I help you?" So much for acting like Brand. "I'll let you handle this, brother. I'll go see about Julia." Brand turned toward the house and jogged off, happy to be set free. Bronc didn't flinch at Brand's departure. He was so focused on the tycoon. She had to give Stephen credit for his poised overconfidence, but he didn't have a clue who he was dealing with. Or maybe he did. He had watched Bronc escort her to her truck that first day she'd met him, after all. For that matter, maybe Bronc had done the same thing with Mr. Anderson later. No one had told her how that visit had ended. "I've asked Shelley to dinner. If you'll excuse us, we need to finish our conversation." Bronc puffed up, bigger than ever. "She doesn't want to go anywhere with you, big shot. Isn't that right, Shelley?" Shelley winced, watching the two men carefully, her eyes shifting back and forth between them. What should she tell Stephen? She didn't want to go to dinner, or anywhere with him, but she had planned to move on, hadn't she? Maybe she should start now. Confusion swirled around her brain. Leaning on her own understanding certainly wasn't working for her now. She remembered the scripture in Proverbs that Julia had encouraged her to memorize. Now she was glad she had. "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." Clearly, she hadn't gotten to the place where she trusted in the Lord with all her heart. She certainly didn't trust Stephen, or Bronc, sadly. Maybe she was just a person who wouldn't trust anyone ever again. Ignore them both. She didn't know where the thought came from, but she decided to obey it. "I'm going to Harper's." "Wait, what?" Bronc plodded after her. "Why are you doing that?" "I'll pick you up at 7, Shelley," Stephen hollered after her. "Be ready, okay? You can choose where we go." Disregarding his words, she hustled toward the barn for the diesel truck. Surely Stephen wouldn't come back for her if she hadn't agreed to go. Would he? Right now, she didn't care what he did. The truck was parked beside her dad's pride and joy, a '57 Chevrolet Bel Air with chrome wheels and white wall tires. It wouldn't be ideal for driving on muddy roads, but it had been her mom's car, and Shelley wanted desperately to feel close to that special woman right now. Their last ride together found them heading to Sacramento, with Shelley in knots over boy troubles in high school. Boy troubles. It was all so trivial, knowing now that her mom's heart attack was mere days away. But today, that history fit Shelley's own aching, twisted heart. She slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The Chevy rumbled to life with throaty power. She cracked the window to better hear the soothing hum of the muffler and shifted into reverse. "Shelley, stop!" Bronc raced up to her door, clamping his hands over the open window. A waft of him hit her nostrils, a combination of working man, Brand, and Bronc. Such an unusual mixture, just as confused as she was right now. "Get out of my way, Bronc." Surprise registered on his face before he tried to alter his expression. "You think I didn't know? That I wouldn't know the difference between you and your twin? I must admit, you had me fooled at first, but the second Brand started talking, the gig was up." The smirk started on one side of his mouth before it morphed into a dazzling smile. Her heart fluttered. "Couldn't fool you, huh?" "No. Now move. I'm going." Shelley, can we talk?" He stood silently while she just stared up at him. "Please," he softened his voice. "Get out of the car. I need to talk to you." The overconfident look gave way to sadness. If she studied his face any longer, she'd give in, leave herself wide open to more heartache. He was already ripping the fragments of her heart into tinier pieces. She needed time to mull over all that had happened, to make decisions about where to go from here. And she couldn't do that while staring at his handsome face with those lines of worry and that bleakness in his eyes. "Give me some time, Bronc. Let me go check on Harper West. I'll be right back." Though she didn't think she would. She had an aunt in Sacramento she could go visit. "Please tell my dad not to worry." She lifted her foot off the brake and began rolling back again. Bronc looked genuinely pained, unsure what to do, a far cry from his usual decisive, even demanding personality. But he finally opted to give her space and backed out of the way. Their eyes locked, his brows lowered, and his hazel irises swirled with intense color. Ripping her gaze away, Shelley pulled out and accelerated down the partially washed-out road. She had no doubt mud was spattering all over the polished car. Her dad wouldn't be pleased, but then she wasn't pleased either. Hadn't been for weeks. She'd envied Julia's sense of peace. If only she could lean on God the same way her friend did. Even though there was strife in Julia's life, too, it never seemed to confuse her or burden her. She took everything to God in prayer and was always better for it. Shelley had been practicing that more. She had to admit, even though her life had not gotten easier, she did feel more comfortable with not being in control of everything. If God was good as well as king over all, she was in good hands. As she pulled up by the main gate at Harper Ranch, she was shocked to see that the water had continued to climb half again as high as it was before. If only the levee breach had been accessible and sandbags available. If only the swollen rivers had receded already. If only she had actually made the trek down the south levee to see if the pipes had been opened and not assumed they had. If only. But she had to deal with what was, not what could be. She needed to make this right. Without wasting any more time, she parked on the top of the levee, donned her jacket, and jogged down the abandoned railroad tracks. It would take her some time to get to the other end, but she had wanted a moment to clear her head anyway, didn't she? She just didn't think it would be refilled with anxiety for Norman and his beloved farm. Brand lingered outside the back door, taking a moment to breathe, contemplating his next move. He was in love with her, had to convince her love was enough. He sucked in a deep breath, then marched into the house and on down the hallway toward the family room and his girl. He didn't care any more about his and Julia's differences. Seeing the difficulties his brother was having with Shelley broke his heart for Bronc, but it had kicked him in the backside at the same time. Enough time had been wasted. He needed his girl. He needed to begin living, really living. His strides lengthened as his heart swelled with thoughts of her. He drew near, rolling around the corner into the big space. His girl was still sitting with Marie and Norman, enjoying the television show and the two elderly folks in equal measure. They all had their heads thrown back in uproarious laughter, so loud he couldn't hear the tinkling pleasure of only Julia's voice. It didn't matter. He was on a mission. Just as he was about to cross the room to her, she rose and hurried toward the hallway, calling over her shoulder, "I'll get us some lemonade. Be right back." Brand backpedaled into the hallway just in time to avoid a collision with her. Startled, her chin came up. Her eyes looked to his. Those stunning sky-blue eyes were filled with shock. "Oh, Bronc, you startled me." Her small hand flattened against her chest. She laughed, her white teeth showing through her full lips. Those lips. He wasn't aware he'd made any kind of decision until he tilted his hat back and swung an arm around her to hold her tight. She squeaked, tensing against his embrace. A small voice in the back of his mind tried to register something was wrong, but it was too late. His wheels were in motion. His free hand curled around her jaw and tilted her head up, giving him easy access to that pretty mouth, opened in surprise. Without a drop of hesitation, he took her mouth with his. His lips moved against hers, hard and hungry and urgent. In the back of his mind, he wondered if he'd overstepped, if she wanted this. He hadn't asked or even given her a moment to ponder. Taking a page out of his brother's book, Brand doubled down, pulling her tighter to his chest, kissing her more fiercely. He felt her small hands slide up between them until they were over his chest, over his heart. His mind scrambled while his body ramped up. With an unnatural strength, she gave him a man-sized shove. The kiss broke as he stumbled backward. Shocked and hurt, Brand steadied himself and stared down into her face. What was that expression he was seeing? Shock, confusion, disgust? Could he have been that far off about what they had together? "What is wrong with you?" Julia glowered. "Have you lost your mind?" Her anger woke up his brain. Embarrassed, he jerked his head up and down the hallway to make sure they were alone. A look back at Julia showed him she was stiff as a 2x4, her hands fisted at her sides, her face in a tight grimace. "Come with me." He reached over and took one of her fists, wrapping his hand all the way around it. He softened his expression and gave her fisted hand a slight tug. "Let's take this outside." Surprisingly, she let him lead her out the front door. But why was she so rigid? Once they were on the other side of the door, he turned toward her. "Julia, I know we have our differences, but—" "What in tarnation are you doing, Bronc? Why are you kissing me? What about Shelley? What about your brother? Why am I— What? I'm not—" Suddenly, every curse he'd ever learned flew out of his mouth. "Oh, dang. Sorry. You should be sorry. What about you—" Hold on, he interrupted. It's Brand. I'm Brand. He patted his chest and couldn't hold back a smile. I'm sorry. I forgot Bronc and I traded places. You what? Bronc wanted me to... Shoot. Telling her the truth was a bad idea. Never mind. I'm sorry you thought I was Bronc. A bark of laughter, unwise as it was, came out of him before he could stop it. I'm sorry. You had to have thought I lost my mind. I thought Bronc had lost his mind. Scary that I couldn't tell you apart right then. Wonder why that is. Well, probably because I was being aggressive. You figured it fit. Plus, you've seen us both in our clothes today, and now I'm wearing his. Shows you how easily twins can dupe someone, eh? She gave him a little whack on the chest. Don't you ever think about doing that again. She scowled, and he laughed again. This was a story he'd tell their grandchildren. Ah, grandchildren. He couldn't get the grin off his face, probably because Julia was so indignant about being kissed by his brother. That was just about the best news he could have received, under the circumstances. He was no risk of Julia choosing Bronc over him, after all. But the fact remained, Julia still wanted a mate who loved God. If he was so sure about his commitment to Julia, did that mean he was ready to pursue God for Julia's sake? The strength went out of him. That would never fly, and he knew it. His journey would have to end with a sincere, true love of God. That meant church, Bible studies, prayer, and being willing to forgive God. Could he forgive God? After all he'd done to him and his family? Brand didn't know. But one thing he did know, he had to talk this through with someone who knew the truth, and someone who cared about them both. Norman. Yes, Brand needed to talk to the man who had made God come alive to him, and he had to talk with Norman before he could tell Julia how he felt about her. Was the time now? Before he could decide, she leaned up on her tiptoes and licked his lips. Licked them. His brain short-circuited and all thought stopped. It seemed like hours went by as he stared into her twinkling eyes before his brain stuttered back into normal thought. Your tongue is purple. Of all things to say, but it was the only thing his limited brain power could come up with. She giggled. Norman gave me a gumdrop. Gumdrop. A food nickname for her. Perfect. That sealed her fate. It's delicious, as are you. You taste like... He interrupted himself to draw her closer. With her only inches away, he took her face in his hands, searched her eyes, and when she only blinked slowly, dreamily, he leaned down and took her mouth again. Sensation spiraled through him. This time, the kiss was slow and sweet. She deserved that. This girl deserved to be treated like a queen. His queen. He wanted her with every fiber of his being. Her innocence drew him, yet her unfathomable wisdom about life, about God, mesmerized him. He slowly drew back, let the kiss end naturally. Brand brushed her fine blonde hair away from her face. A change had come over her expression, one he hadn't expected. Sadness. Oh, Brand. The whisper of defeat in her voice obliterated him. He couldn't let her dwell on impossibilities. For nothing will be impossible with God. That truth settled into his heart. Grape, he said on a breathy sigh. She blinked in confusion, but a small smile started to appear. What? You taste like grape, my sweet gumdrop. The grin that overtook her beautiful mouth made his heart falter, then leap with joy. They both grinned then, their eyes dancing off each other's faces. Brand might have a lot to prove to this girl in the months to come, but he knew one thing for sure. He was ready. Chapter 39. What should I do, Father? Bronc prayed out loud as he watched Shelley's vehicle spin down the road to head to Harper's. I can't let her go alone, can I? 1 minute later, he felt compelled to jog to Brand's pickup truck. Thrilled to find the keys in the ignition, he jumped in and turned the key hard, bringing the truck to life. Part of him knew leaving the premises was against the recovery home's rules, but he would take the punishment, whatever it was. Shelley was too important. She meant too much to him to risk her doing something dangerous, and knowing her, she would do whatever she thought was necessary to help Norman. In no time, he reached the ranch and parked behind the '57 Chevy, then jumped out and raced down the levee a ways. He saw Shelley's silhouette halfway down the levee, heading toward the pipes. "Shelley!" he hollered, but she was too far away to hear him. She couldn't open those gates alone. The water had to be surging over the access road above the pipes by now, or close to it. Too dangerous for her to be navigating it. Would he fare better sprinting toward her from here, or heading her off from the south? He teetered briefly, then jumped back in the truck, mind made up. He whipped the truck back toward the Twin Cities Road and gunned it. It would take him a good 10 minutes to intersect her, but it looked like she had about that much time before she'd get to the pipes. There was no time to waste. Shelley staggered to the southernmost boundary of the property, wet with perspiration, legs like noodles, her thoughts all bound up in what she was going to find at the pipe's gates. She'd never asked Bronc how the gates worked, whether automatically or manually. Would there be a snarl of hyacinth blocking the outflow? A collapsed levee wall already underwater? A working valve wheel she just had to turn? She suddenly felt very small and foolish for being out here all alone. The trek over the broken tracks had taken more out of her than she anticipated. But she was here now. Muddy water lapped and swirled close to the top of the southern levee, but the dirt wall looked intact. She gingerly placed her weight on the flattened gravel surface of the short access road. The gravel ground and slid and then held beneath her boot. This was dicey. There were no two ways about it. But if anyone was going to succeed, it was her. Here. Now. With her lighter weight and quicker reflexes than any of the other cowhands, even if they'd all been lined up for a go. And this was the only way to drain the ranch, to have any hope of planting crops in spring. As if to offer the death blow, thunder clapped overhead. She jumped. No, 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 no! Bankruptcy loomed. Norman was doomed. Shelley tottered forward and steadied herself over the first pipe's wheel valve. The metal was frigid under her hands, gritty with mud and debris. She put her weight into trying to crank it counterclockwise. It didn't budge. She repositioned her grip and hunched lower, hoping to exert more torque. The wheel and the screw and the gate beneath all vibrated with the turbulence of tremendous water pressure. She was quicker and lighter than men, but not nearly as strong. Still, this was up to her now. Lefty loosey, she reminded herself, and twisted, shaking with the effort, about to give up when the wheel moved. Inertia overcome, it spun freely, squeaking with each rotation, easy as pie. Someone had to have recently oiled it. Good. Twist, twist, twist. Once the wheel had elevated the gate below as far as the threaded stem allowed, she watched the water for a few minutes. Had it done any good? Nothing seemed to change. In fact, if anything, the water was coming higher. She sped to the second pipe. She didn't look back, only forward, trying to ignore the fact that she was now splashing through floodwater that streamed over the southern levee top. The second valve was also easy to turn. She twisted, 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 as fast and as hard as she could. Breathless and tingling from exertion, she paused to catch her breath, and only then realized the water had suddenly risen to her ankles. She quick-stepped to the third pipe, praying the levee didn't disintegrate under her. "Shelley! Get out of there! The water has shifted to the left, rushing out that first pipe. It's going to knock you off your feet if it gets much higher." Was that? She glanced over her shoulder to see Bronc, still in Brand's clothes. His truck was idling behind him, the driver's side door hanging open. He hadn't even turned off the ignition before running for her. No, they needed all 3 pipe gates open to drain the ranch completely. She bent to twist the third valve wheel open, but it wouldn't budge. Had she twisted the wrong way? Lefty-loosey, not righty-tighty. Yep, she had it right. This one must not have been oiled. Maybe she should have started with this valve, so she'd be closer to dry ground and safety by now. "Hang on to that wheel! Don't let go!" Bronc's voice had gotten closer. This time, when she looked over her shoulder, she saw him half walking, half swimming toward her. He had a rope tied around his middle, with the other end tied to the bumper of his truck. Good thinking. The valve wheel disappeared from sight in a rush of turbulent water. Now, waist deep, she tried turning the hand wheel with all her might. She wouldn't leave this undone. Too much was at stake. Norman would never recover. It still didn't budge. "Shell, hang on!" She carefully shifted around to the other side of the wheel so she could watch Bronc's progress. She held tight, as he had insisted. Bronc was nearly to her. The water so deep and powerful it would have swept her away if she hadn't heeded his request to hang on. How had it gotten so high all of a sudden? But then she realized she just hadn't seen the steady rise while she worked with single-minded focus. Bronc reached her side. She braced herself for a scolding. Instead, he inched around behind her, tucked her head under his chin, and embraced her with such fervor she thought she heard her spine pop. So thankful to be in his arms, she was stunned when he yelled, "Are you trying to kill yourself? Gad! You could have been swept off this levee. We probably would never have found your body." He double-checked that her hands were still on the handwheel. "Hold tight." Then he untied the rope from himself. Before she could ask what he was about, he swung the rope around her waist and tied some kind of sailor's knot. "You see that truck?" He pointed, and she nodded. "I want you in it. Now go." "No, I'm not leaving you." The roar of the water was beginning to drown out their voices. "We are not arguing about this. I have to open this valve. Go! Now!" He gave her a shove toward the truck and began working at the handwheel. "I can help you with that, Bronc. Let me." "Do not talk back, rebel." He shoved her toward safety again. His best chance of getting out alive was ensuring she would not become a liability for him. She knew she needed to obey. She grabbed the rope and started to pull herself toward the truck. Fear began to rise. Her clothes were plastered to her body, wet hair hanging in strings around her face. Her legs could barely move against the current. The wall of water seemed to rise an inch every minute. Doubt beat at her thoughts, at the same tempo as the water beating against her legs. How was Bronc going to follow without a rope? Should she go back? She couldn't lose him. The overwhelming possibility that she might immobilized her. No, she wouldn't leave him. She turned back for him and saw the handwheel finally giving way. He began to twist. She could help with that. A surge of water whisked her off her bank. She screeched as she was swept downstream toward the slough. Under she went. She couldn't see a thing. Churning froth was all around her, mixed with tangles of hyacinth. Struggling for the surface, she finally clawed her way toward air, gasping and hollering, "Bronc!" Down again she went. This time, the force of the water sent her into a particularly thick tangle of weeds. Purple flowers folded in around and above her, trapping her under the roiling water. Pushing with hands and feet toward the surface, she broke through and sucked in air. With eyes nearly blinded by streaming water, she saw Bronc dive toward her. No! She wanted to scream at him. He'd never make it through this maze of hyacinth. Somewhere amidst the sounds of her slapping and coughing and gasping, she heard Bronc's voice drawing nearer. "Shelley! My rebel!" Did she hear him right? Or had she already lost consciousness? Had he just called her my rebel? "I'm here!" she sputtered before taking in more water and choking. Under she went again. This time she didn't think she had the strength to rise above the water. Hyacinth twined around her arms and legs and pulled her down. She couldn't see a thing through the murk as she felt the water shove her farther into the slough. Suddenly, the rope at her waist went rigid and yanked her down. It was going to drown her. With a final surge of energy, she breaststroked her way to the surface. If she went down again, that would be it. Strong hands shoved against her back, pushing her toward the bank. The rope loosened from around her waist. "Bronc, thank you, Lord." She grasped the rope in front of her and began to pull as hard as her limp arms allowed. Bronc must be swimming, since he thrust her forward in a steady rhythm of push, release, push, release. He kept at it until she was at the bank just below where his truck was parked. One final shove, and she was above the water and onto muddy ground. It didn't feel like it would give way, thank goodness. Just as she turned around to help him up, she saw his body get swept away in the current. Water was streaming hard through the opened pipes now, draining the ranch but sweeping her love away from her. "No! Bronc!" She scrambled to her feet and yanked up on the circle of rope at her torso. It was snug, but not as bad as if she'd tried to take it down past her hips. She tugged and pulled, getting it past one shoulder, then easily past the second one and off her head. Searching the slough for Bronc's head, she hollered until she was hoarse. "Bronc! Come up! Please come back to me! Please!" Her eyes scanned the water hyacinth. "Bronc Buster! You answer me right now!" Then she saw it, the top of his head, about 30 feet away. The rope had to be at least 40 feet long. "Bronc, can you hear me?" She hollered with all her might. His head went under, and she screamed. But when it came back up, he was actually closer. Then she realized he was swimming underwater toward her. "Lord, please help my love. Strengthen his arms. Give him energy, oxygen. Get him here safely. Amen." He went down again, and again, but each time he got just a hair closer. The current had picked up as the water poured into the slough, but somehow Bronc was winning against the current. He'd only be able to keep that up until he couldn't. "Keep him strong, Lord." The next time his head popped up, he choked, then sputtered, unable to take in a full breath. "I'm throwing you the rope, Bronc," she hollered. "Here it comes." He looked straight at her. She twisted the rope over her head as if she were roping a calf. "Please, Jesus, help him catch it." When she saw his arm reach up, she threw it with all her might, sensing added strength filling her weary arms. It had to be from God. The rope flew across the thrashing waters and mats of water hyacinth. Please, God. The rope hung in the air, unspooling, pushed by the breeze, until finally it landed, right around Bronc's arm. The perfect throw, the perfect catch from a perfect God. Thank you, Lord. Bronc looped the rope around one arm and shoulder, and over his head, then began pulling toward her. How he had the strength to do that could only come from a God of mercy and grace. Hand over hand, he hauled himself forward, disappearing underwater every few feet. She held her breath each time and prayed. When he finally reached the slough bank, Shelley grabbed his arm, then his belt, and yanked him with all her might. They fell together in the weeds and mud behind them, lay there panting. Minutes slid by before either one could breathe normally. Then Shelley began to laugh, and hug him, and laugh some more. Her laughter peaked and then turned into a sob. "I thought I'd lost you," she sobbed again. "What a great God we have!" She kissed his face and neck and hands, anything she could reach and touch. "Thank you, God, for him saving me so I could save him."
"Amen."
His watery voice barely came through, but the arms of steel he'd wrapped around her were all she needed. Their bodies relaxed into each other. She held him to her chest and began to sing, evoking memories of former nights after he'd been drinking. Only this was so much better, to have him alert and clean and free. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. A rich baritone voice merged with hers. Bronc joined her in the second and third verses, like he'd known them his whole life when she was sure he'd only just learned them at rehab. What a joy this was. An absolute joy. "So, you learned about God in rehab?" she whispered near his ear. "Received the gift Jesus offered, yes. Hallelujah, Bronc. I have too." "I love him, Shelley. I want him in my life." He turned his head so he could look up into her face. "And I love you, and I want you in my life." She gasped. Tears sprang to her eyes. "You do?" "More than anything." With one soaked arm, he reached up and wrapped his hand around her damp neck, pulling her down to meet his lips. All she could do was kiss him back, her warm tears pooling around the cold water at their joined lips, immersing her in love. When he broke the kiss, he gazed into her eyes with pure affection in his. "And Shell?" "Yes." "Next time, start with the third valve and finish at the first." She barked out a surprised laugh. He joined her until their joy filled the country air. "And Bronc?" "Yes." "I love you too." Bronc used the last of his energy to climb the hill with Shelley and clambered into the truck. He started the engine and the heater, and before long he was thawed out enough to drive. He stretched out a hand to her, pulling her close to him. Smoothing her damp hair back, he combed his gaze over her face with affection. "Ready to drive back? They'll be worried." "Yes." She scooted closer yet and wrapped her hands around his soggy bicep and squeezed. They gazed into each other's eyes. "I'm ready to take on anything now that you're still alive. God is good. And thank you, Bronc Buster, for saving my life." "I had to. I couldn't see a life without you. Thank you for throwing me a rope." "Caught me a good one." She laughed and squeezed his arm again. God had saved them both, and not just from the physical wall of water and hyacinth, but from eternal hell and damnation. And he'd saved Bronc from living a life of pure hell from addiction. He had much to be thankful for. He couldn't thank God enough that his girl had forgiven him and loved him too. Their drive home passed in the hazy afterglow of exhaustion and relief. Bronc stopped the truck outside Taylor's front door and stared at the house a moment, knowing full well that this reality had never been guaranteed. He trembled a little, remembering the abject fear of drowning, of his body screaming for oxygen as he choked on muddy water and clawed against hyacinth. But the warmth of Shelley's body soothed him down to his soul. They got out of the truck and trudged through the door together. Shelley's dad, Norman, Marie, Brand, and Julia all looked up from the dining room table as Bronc followed Shelley inside, dripping a murky puddle onto the floor from under the 2 towels they had donned in the mudroom. Mr. Taylor jumped to his feet. "What happened?" "A lot." Bronc looked at Shelley and grinned. "Yes, a lot," she repeated, as she grinned up at him. He wrapped both arms around her, looking down into her face. "I saved her. She saved me. Jesus saved us both. And we're in love." They all burst into laughter, and the conversation went on for the next 10 minutes as the group perused the details. Norman, in all his wisdom, had the last say.
God protects, God loves, God saves.
And, by the way, the recovery group already returned to the home, Mr. Taylor said. "We promised to take you back later. Oh, and we sent that little weasel Anderson on his way. He won't be coming back to take Shelley to dinner."
"Or to steal my ranch from me."
Norman winked at Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Taylor winked back. Bronc hugged Shelley again, gazing at the endless sky, his thoughts borne toward Christ. Or take the most precious thing of all, the treasures we lay up in heaven. The end. Thank you for listening to Let Your Lives Begin Again. Coming in 2025, watch for Trevor's love story, Let Yourself Be Whole Again, and the end of the Cooper saga. And if you've enjoyed listening to this story, please leave a comment on the site you purchased this audiobook. If you'd like to purchase a digital or print version of this book, find Janith Hooper on Amazon.com. Thank you. Dedication. This book is dedicated to Janith Hooper's youngest son, Benjamin John Hooper. He battled with the disease of alcoholism for many years before he even knew he had a problem, and then for years after, when he took on the fight in earnest. Alcoholism is a horrific disease, not to be taken lightly or swept under the rug. Too many are struggling and ultimately suffering from the physical effects of this disease. But almost more savage are the social and spiritual effects people endure. At the release of this book, Ben will be over 4 years sober. His testimony is laid out in the back of this book under author's note. You won't want to miss his victory story. To those struggling with this addiction, Jan and my heart go out to you. No matter how many times you have tried to stop and failed, there is hope. I pray this book brings you comfort and encouragement. To the family and friends of alcoholics, I pray this book helps you grasp the struggle and model one way to approach the disease, with open eyes and wisdom from above. Of the many scripture verses where God offers strength in times of trouble, one of my favorites is Isaiah 40:31, KJV. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. May you find your strength in the Lord, dear reader, that you also may mount on wings as eagles to overcome the challenges you and your loved ones face today. And to Jan's son, Ben, the Hooper family are grateful beyond words to see you whole and healthy, by God's grace and your willingness to fight the good fight. To God be the glory.